Now, today, we're going to see, what if you madly fallen in love with Harry Potter? Part 1. The Prisoner of Azkaban. And I replaced you with the name of original name Yuki, so imagine yourself as Yuki. Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. After getting her letter to the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Yuki Sterling was on the compartment to go to Hogwarts, reading the Quibbler made by her uncle. The compartment door opened as Yuki turned to it. The boy who lived, Harry Potter, was standing in the doorway with raven-colored hair, his hair laying neatly on his head covering his lightning bolt scar, with round glasses that were broken. "Can I join?" Harry asked her as she nodded, almost in a dream state, and turned back to her newspaper, not paying no mind that he was the boy who lived. "You know it's upside down, right?" Harry pointed out as Yuki lowered her newspaper and nodded. "Well, yes, that is the point dash," Yuki stated as she closed it and placed the Quibbler on her lap. The boy furrowed his eyebrows. "Runes, my uncle makes them. I'm Yuki Sterling." Harry nodded with a small smile. "Harry Potter dash." She nodded since everyone knew who the boy who lived was and his story, being the boy who made Voldemort disappear and go into hiding. "I know who you are, Harry Potter." Yuki spoke with a grin. "Is your family all wizards?" Harry asked. Yuki thought about it for a second before nodding. "Yeah, my mom was, but she got expelled during her 7th year for letting a creature roam the corridors, and my dad dash. But I don't know much dash," she lied. Yuki and her father were closed until she was 9 and witnessed his death right in front of her. He was an Auror, meaning his job was already dangerous, but every adult knows how he was sent up by a close friend. "Your mom was expelled?" Harry was shocked over that fact. She nodded. "Well, she got expelled and then followed her dream to travel the world and find magical creatures with magizoologist Newt Scamander, who happened to also get expelled." Yuki explained. "So you're never with your mom? What about your dad?" Harry asked. Yuki looked at the Quibbler and grew uncomfortable. "I have a mom, so that's all I need dash," she sweetly said with a small smile looking at him. "Plus, my uncle and cousin. I'm the only child, so I stay there most of the time, but I travel with her to New York and stay here. I almost went to Ilvermorny because of a dash." Harry furrowed his eyebrows. "Oh yeah, it's a wizarding school for Americans. I'm pretty sure you know New York is in America dash." Harry nodded with a chuckle. "Yeah, I'm aware. At least pretty sure unless it moved dash," he said to her as the girl grinned and laughed a little bit. The compartment door opened once more as a redhead stuck his head in the compartment. "Mine? Everywhere else is full," he asked, looking at the two as Yuki nodded, and so did Harry. "Not at all," Harry said, motioning as the redhead walked in and then sat next to Yuki. "I'm Ron, by the way." "Yuki," she sweetly said, looking at the redhead. "I heard. I'm Harry." Ron nodded, already knowing who he was from early in the stories. "I heard." For a second, there was an awkward silence. "Is it true? I mean, have you really got the, Ron suggested as Yuki turned and looked at Harry. Without prompting, Harry lifts his hair, shows the scar. "Wicked," Ron spoke. "So are all your family's wizards?" Harry asked, looking at Yuki and Ron. Ron thought about it for a second, just like Yuki has recently done. "Huh? Oh, I think so. Well, Mom's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never knew about him." Ron told, looking at the two. "My mom's side is all wizards." Yuki simply mentioned, letting Ron know, as she put her newspaper back up upside down and didn't answer anymore, not wanting to bring up her father. Ron and Harry exchanged looks as Ron was more weirded out and Harry was more worried. "I heard you live with Muggles. What are they like?" Yuki asked, diffusing the tension. "Horrible. Well, not all of them. Mine is, though. Trade them for 3 wizard brothers any day." Harry expressed, looking and turning to Ron. 5. I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others. But if I do, it's no big deal because they did it first. You never get anything new, either, with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand. Scabbers used to be Percy's. Ron reaches into his pocket, pulls out a fat, gray, seemingly unconscious rat. Hardly ever wakes up. He's useless, basically. Percy got an owl for making perfect, but Mom and Dad couldn't afford. I got Scabbers instead. Ron looks embarrassed. Just then, a dimpled woman pushing a trolley full of sweets pops her head in. Anything off the trolley, dears? Ron mumbles, no thanks. Take out a lumpy sandwich. Harry studies him. As Yuki was quickly lost into reading, Harry then digs into his pockets, heavy with coin. We'll take the lot. Spread out on an empty seat. Harry marvels at the strange, wondrous sweets before him as Yuki was sucking on a heart-shaped cherry lollipop. Birdie, bots, every flavor beans? Harry muttered, looking up at the two purebloods. They mean every flavor. There's chocolate, peppermint, but you can also get liver or spinach or tripe. George reckons he had a bogey-flavored one once. Ron remembered stuffing his mouth with sweets. These aren't real frogs, are they? Harry holds up a pack of chocolate frogs. Something is wriggling under the foil, then sees that Ron already has a very realistic leg squirreling out the corner of his mouth. No, they're just a spell. Makes the object that is used move around. Yuki explained knowing spells really well because of her uncle's wife that passed away just a couple of days ago. Just a spell. Besides, it's the card you want. Each pack's got a famous witch or wizard. Got about 500 myself. Watch it. As Harry breaks the foil on his pack, the frog springs into the air and out the open train window. That's rotten luck. They've only got one good jump in them, to begin with. Harry glances at the card in his hand. On it, there's a man with a crooked nose, long estet ilver beard, and half-moon glasses underneath is the name. Dumbledore, he's the most common one to get in that set. Yuki explained, looking at Harry. I've about 6 of him. Trade you scabbers, though, if you get Agrippa or Ptolemy. Considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times, Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for his discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, a Nicholas Flamel. Approximately 150 years old, Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music, temp and bowling, and looking 150 years old. Thought he would be older, Ron uttered. Same dash, Yuki nodded, agreeing with the boy. Hey, he's gone. The two turned to Harry, looking at a blank card. Well, you can't expect him to hang around all day, can you? It's just in the muggle world, people stay putting photos. Yeah, I heard about that and saw a few. It's odd dash, Yuki told, turning to Ron. Queenie had pictures all over her apartment that didn't move just because of her muggle husband Jacob. You should be the one talking, Ron uttered under his breath. Yuki didn't mind it as she looked back down at her newspaper. Pathetic, isn't it? Fred gave me a spell that's to turn him yellow. Want to see? Harry nods, looking away from Yuki, eager to see some magic. Ron pulls out a battered wand just as the compartment door opens with a girl with her robes on and bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth look in. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville has lost one. Yuki shook her head. No, but there was a chocolate frog. A real frog dash, she said. Oh, are you doing magic? Let's see then. She sits down next to Yuki. Ron looks a bit taken aback, but clears his throat nonetheless, poises his wand over Scabbers. Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow. Turn this stupid, fat rat yellow. Scabbers snorts but otherwise remains fat, gray, and asleep. Are you sure that's a real spell? Yuki nodded, agreeing with the girl. Well, it's not very good, is it? I've only tried a few simple ones myself, but they've all worked for me. For example, to Harry's surprise, Hermione takes her wand, points it directly over his brow, then stops. Goodness, you're Harry Potter, aren't you? I know all about you, of course. I was doing a little recreational reading, and you're in modern magical history, the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Yuki and Hermione nodded. I am. Didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me. Anyway, Oculus Reparo. Instantly, the cracked bridge of Harry's glasses is mended. There! That's better, isn't it? I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. And you two are? Yuki looked away from her lap. Yuki Sterling. Ron is still staring at the glasses, feeling a bit outdone. Ron Weasley. Pleasure. Does either of you know what house you'll be in? I'm hoping for Gryffindor. I hear Dumbledore himself was in it, but I think I might just die if they put me in Slytherin. That was you-know-whose house. Ravenclaw dash. Family tradition. Other than my father W, who was in Gryffindor. Yuki explained, looking down at her hands, trying not to think about the image in her head. You three had better change into your robes. I expect we'll be arriving soon. You've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know? As she exits, Harry and Ron just sit, staring at the door. Yuki stood up in silence and went to change into her uniform. She's an odd one, Ron uttered, turning to Harry as he shrugged. Seems interesting. As the Scarlet engine hisses to a stop, Yuki and the others spill out. Yuki's robes shimmer grandly as she had specter specs on her head. Fur's years over here. Hagrid gives Harry a wink as he comes loping out of the darkness, swinging a lamp. Ron, preoccupied with wiping his nose clean on his robes, stops dumbstruck by Hagrid's size. What are you wearing? On your head? Harry asked, turning to Yuki. Specter specs. They make rackspurts visible to the wizarding eye dash. And what are rackspurts? Ron asked. Invisible creatures that floated through one's ears, causing their brain to go fuzzy. Yuki motioned towards her head as they walked forward, and the two boys exchanged looks and kept walking. The Black Lake, where a fleet of tiny boats glides silently over a glassy lake. Yuki rides with Ron, Harry, Hermione, and Neville Longbottom, someone with who she got along quickly. Gazing at the dark tree of the first that surrounds them. A glint of sliver flickers through the black trees, like a dream. Yuki watched in almost a trance, staring at the castle. You there? Don't be trailing your fingers in the water. You might find it on, get him all back. Yuki turned to see Hagrid was speaking to a pointy-faced boy, and he turned, whispering to his two friends. Yuki peers into the black water, sees her own Y/S/C face looking back, then soft glitter of reflected light dances on the surface. She looked up at a magnificent castle drift into view. Hogwarts, she slowly smiled, looking at the castle. Inside the great hall in the castle at night, Yuki and the others enter a grand entryway lit with flaming torches. Professor McGonagall, a rather severe-looking witch in an emerald cloak, stands before a pair of towering doors. She lifted her chin, surveys the new students. Welcome to Hogwarts. In a moment, you will pass through these doors and join your classmates. But before you can take your seats, you must be sorted into your houses. They are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. While here, your house is in many ways your family. Your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose points. At the end of the year, the house with the most is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you. Just then, a rather large toad springs forth, croaks Trevor. Neville, blissfully relieved, gathers his toad, then peers up from the hem of Professor McGonagall's robes. Will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will begin momentarily. Professor McGonagall glowers at Neville, then exits. As she goes, there is a brief clamor of sound from the students waiting in the great hall beyond. How exactly do they sort us? Some kind of test, I think. Fred says it hurts like hell, but I'm sure he was looking. At least, I think he was. It's a hat. They put it on your head, and it tells you about yourself. Odd to say the least, Yuki explained, looking at the two boys. Just then, Draco Malfoy pushes through the crowd, shadowed by the boys from the boat. Malfoy stares openly at Harry's scar. It's true then, what they were saying on the train. Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts. Harry's eyes slide, appraise the other two boys. Oh, this is Crabbe and Goyle. And my name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Ron coughs, masking a snigger. Malfoy's eyes narrow. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask yours. Red hair, freckles, and hand-me-downs, you must be a Weasley, you'll soon find out some. Wizarding families are better than others. Potter and I could help you there. Malfoy turned and glanced at Yuki and Ron, who both were in pureblood families. Malfoy extends his hand, but Harry's gaze remains level. I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself. Thanks, Malfoy's eyes glitter with rage. Finally, he drops his hand, turns away. Well, he's rather disagreeable, isn't he? Yuki, Ron, and Harry turn, see Hermione. Just then, Professor McGonagall returns. We are ready for you. Yuki and the others file into a strangely splendid place lit by thousands of candles floating in midair over 4 long tables lined with students. Harry looks to the windows below the ceiling, finds glorious stars and an icy blue moon. It's not real, the ceiling. It's only bewitched to look like the night sky. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history. Hermione explained, walking next to Yuki. Professor McGonagall sweeps to the front of the room where a wizard's hat, patched and frayed, sits on a stool. Before we begin, Professor Dumbledore would like to say a few words. Yuki watches with great interest as the great wizard himself rises from his seat at the high table. Yes, and here they are: Nitwit, Blubber, Oddment, Tweak. Thank you. The great hall thundered with applause. I hear he's a genius. Hermione continued. As the applause stops, the hat twitches. At the brim, a rip opens, and the hat begins to talk. Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see, so try me on and I will tell you where you ought to be. Dash. As students applaud, the took a bow, and Professor McGonagall steps forward with a roll of parchment. When I call your name, you will come forth, put on the hat, and be sorted. Hermione Granger. Hermione walked up, mumbling to herself. Mental, that one. I'm telling you. Ron whispered to Harry as Yuki stood next to him. They watch Hermione seat herself, lower the hat. Gryffindor. Percy pulls out a chair for Hermione at the Gryffindor table. Draco Malfoy. Slytherin. Ron mumbled. Draco Malfoy swaggers forth and grips the hat. He's barely touched it to his head when Slytherin. There's not a witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. Draco's father was one of the first to join you-know-who when he got to power, and one of the first to come back when he lost it. Susan Bones. As Susan Bones dash up front, Harry glances to the high table. Dumbledore watches the proceedings placidly, while Professor Quirrell talks to a hook-nosed man with greasy black hair and sallow skin. Slowly, as if he can feel Harry's gaze, Snape turns, looks straight into Harry's eyes. Instantly, a sharp, hot pain shoots across Harry's scar. Ouch! Harry, what's wrong? Yuki asked, turning to him. Nothing. I'm fine, Harry uttered, moving his hand from his forehead. Hufflepuff. As Susan Bones runs off, Yuki Sterling McGonagall announced. Yuki froze but slowly walked up the stairs and sat on the stool. Very clever and could do so much good in Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, but a lot of determination, courage, and chivalry. She wasn't thinking about what house she wanted to be in. Honestly, Yuki couldn't care what house she was in. It wouldn't change how she acted. Gryffindor. After a while, Yuki, Ron, Hermione, and Harry warmed up to each other, Ron being the one having to do some warming up. After fighting a troll, getting the Philosopher's Stone, helping with the Chamber of Secrets when it was reopened. The four of them were inseparable. Yuki and Harry got closer than her, and Ron, as he saw her as a younger sister he had to protect, and Hermione saw Yuki as a best friend and sister. Harry and Yuki were just really good friends. Yuki spends the summer after her second year sick, and with the Lovegoods, she finds out Harry blew up his aunt. However, she soon learns that a dangerous criminal and Voldemort's trusted aide, Sirius Black, has escaped from Azkaban prison and wants to kill Harry to avenge the Dark Lord. To worsen the conditions for Harry, vile creatures called Dementors are appointed to guard the school gates and inexplicably happen to have the most horrible effect on him. Little does Yuki know that by the end of this year, many holes in her father's past from what she knows about it will be filled up, and she will have a clearer vision of what the future has in store for her. 3 years have passed as Yuki was now 13 and starting her third year at Hogwarts. Ophelia was always away because of her job, but Yuki understood that and didn't really mind. So Yuki was always with her uncle and cousin, Luna Lovegood and Xenophilius. Just like right now, Yuki was sitting in Luna's room, which she stayed in at night. As Luna was sleeping, walking somewhere in the house, Yuki was up, making sure that her cousin wouldn't get hurt during her sleepwalking. The Lovegoods were creative, but on the odd side, which gave Yuki thick skin with bullying and people calling her loony. Yuki was reading the Book of Mythical Beasts and Magical Creatures. Meet your favorite monsters, fairies, heroes, and tricksters from all around the world. The third years will take magical creatures with Hagrid, which Yuki was excited about going back to Hogwarts and seeing her friends. It took her a while to see that Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny Weasley and Neville were her friends, but now she sees them as friends. Hermione was in France, and Ron was in Egypt. Yuki was supposed to go with her mother on holidays until she came down with a nasty case of the flu, leaving her with Xenophilius and Luna. But that didn't stop Yuki from getting Harry a birthday present, since she knew the Dursleys, those nasty muggles Harry lives with, wouldn't do anything for his birthday. The girl got Harry a bracelet with his name on it that she made herself. The door opened as Luna walked in and went back into the bed, causing Yuki to finally shut the light off and put her book to the side, going to sleep. Everyone went back to Hogwarts tomorrow as Yuki sat in the living room of the Lovegood residence, which was a black house, but inside everything was colorful and childlike. "Good morning, Yuki," Luna greeted with a smile as she walked down the steps and looked at her cousin. "Sirius Black, Xenophilius announced as Yuki and Luna both turned to the man with blonde hair, and Xenophilius was writing on his notepad for the Quibbler as Yuki and Luna went back to talking. "Luna, did you find your earrings? Reckon you put them in the jeweler box?" Yuki asked, turning to the girl with platinum blonde hair that was in the ponytail, but usually back length. "No, but I'll find them soon, no doubt," Luna said with a smile as Yuki got up to grab an apple and then sat back down. "I can make you a new pair if you need some," Yuki said, looking at Luna as the girl nodded and thanked her for the offer. The Y/C/H girl turned to her uncle, who seemed really interested in writing the news story for the newspaper. "What is it about Sirius Black, Uncle Xenophilius?" Yuki asked, walking over and sitting next to him at the round dining table. Xenophilius looked up from his notepad and handed it to Yuki, who looked down and studied it for a second. "Sirius Black as he's painted?" Part 1. For 13 years, Sirius Black has been believed guilty of the mass murder of 12 innocent muggles and 1 wizard. Black's audacious escape from Azkaban 2 months ago has led to the widest manhunt ever conducted by the Ministry of Magic. None of us has ever questioned that he deserves to be recaptured and handed back to the Dementors. Or does he? "What do you mean? Does he?" Yuki asked, turning to her uncle. Xenophilius took the notepad back. No evidence was clear if Black did all those murders or not. Yuki nodded and walked back over to Luna as she took a bite from her apple. The whole Sirius Black story made her think about it all day. Yuki sent the bracelet to Harry and didn't really care if he said thank you, even though she knew he was going to. She sat on the couch with a cough that hurt her throat since she was sick. "Here, Yuki, I made this. Might turn your fingers blue for the rest of the day." Xenophilius handed Yuki a blue potion as she took it. The day has passed, as Yuki was about to get on the Hogwarts Express, and Ophelia was back in town. Her fingers turned blue for a short amount of time, but they were back to normal. "Ready, dear?" she asked her daughter as Yuki nodded, pushing her truck with her white and brown owl names. Y/O/N. Yuki ran through platform 9 3/4 and saw the Hogwarts Express, which was a maroon and black color. Smoke was coming from the sides like always as Yuki smiled a little at the sight of going back home. "Remember, I'll see you at the end of this school term, Ophelia said, hugging her daughter. Yuki hugged her mother back and nodded. Love you too, Yuki said as the third year walked over and went to the express and handed the man the ticket. Luna was already in a compartment as she comes to the Hogwarts Express early to get her own compartment. Looney Sterling is back for another year, Malfoy teased with a smirk, looking at Yuki. Yuki ignored the boy, but Ginny Weasley didn't. Honestly, stick a rag in it, Malfoy, the redhead said, poking her head out of the compartment. A young weasel protecting her girlfriend? Ginny's face went bright red as Malfoy smirked. Malfoy Zoregs should be out there, tiny little creatures that eat away pieces of your brain. Yuki motioned towards her head as she dreamily spoke. Malfoy's face has gone pale as he walked away. Yuki grinned, turning to Ginny. What is that? Yuki shrugged. I imagine them to be these small blue floating creatures, beautiful things. Ginny just nodded before walking back towards her compartment. The girl was about to keep and looking around for a compartment until she heard, Yuki! Hermione shouted once she got onto the train. Yuki turned to Hermione as the two of them hugged lovingly. Hello. Hermione, how was France? By the things you sent, it seemed beautiful, Yuki asked. It was brilliant. We visited all of the historical monuments and everything. I really wish you could have joined us. My mom and dad wouldn't have minded one bit. Hermione told, looking at Yuki as the girl listened and shook her head. Hermione asked Yuki if she wanted to go last year, but then Yuki got sick and couldn't go. I wish I could. I heard there were lovely creatures there, like the Lobalug. Yuki muttered as Hermione furrowed her eyebrows. When it came to creatures, plants, and astronomy, Yuki was smarter than Hermione, who didn't care much about those subjects. Mind tell me what that is? It's a simple creature, 10 inches long, comprising a rubbery spout and a venom sac. The Lobalug used its venom sac as a weapon, contracting it and expelling the venom in the direction of an attacker if threatened, Yuki defined. Hermione nodded as Ron and Harry walked up to the two girls standing. You have to stop losing that rat dash, Harry's voice rang in Yuki's ears. Hello, Ron and Harry. Yuki greeted with a small smile as she hugged Ron, who hugged her back, and then hugged Harry, whose face turned almost a blush pink and wearing the bracelet Yuki had sent him. Hello, hey, should we go and look for a compartment? Hermione remembered as the three of them nodded, and Yuki let go of Harry. The aisle teams with students. Yuki, Harry, Ron, and Hermione worked their way down the aisle, looking for an empty compartment. I didn't mean to blow her up. Harry had trouble with his memory. Lost control. Brilliant. Yuki and Hermione both turned to Ron, who shrugged, looking at them. Honestly, Ron, it's not funny, Hermione explained, looking at her. Harry's lucky he wasn't expelled. Yuki continued, or sent to Azkaban dash. The group turned to Yuki as they just nodded and turned around, used to Yuki being truthful. I still think it was brilliant. I mean, she deserved it. By the means, Ron repeated with a shrug. Snap, snap, snap. A copy of the monster book of monster scuttles, crab-like down the aisle, pursued by Neville Longbottom. Hi, Yuki, Harry, Ron, Hermione. Yuki smiled a little at the boy. Neville and her have grown close in the past 2 years. Hello, Neville. Everyone said hello after Yuki. Hermione opened up a compartment as Yuki looked away from Neville, who walked past. Yuki was wearing a necklace with a butterbeer cap, with blueberry earrings that Luna gave her. The necklaces that she was wearing, one of them, were charmed to keep the Nargles away. As they slip inside, they find a man in shabby robes slumped against the window, asleep. He looks ill, exhausted. The four of them eyes him warily and whispered, Who'd you reckon he is? Ron asked. Professor R.J. Lupin. The four of them turned to Hermione as Yuki put the quibbler on her lap. You know everything. How is it she knows everything? Harry and Yuki both shrugged. It's on his case. She points. Stamped in peeling letters on a battered case is Professor R.J. Lupin. Harry looked over at the sleeping man. Is he really asleep? Seems to be. Why? What is it, Harry? Yuki asked, telling her something was on his mind, as he turned to her for a second before turning to the group. Close the door. Yuki, Hermione, and Ron exchange a curious glance. Then Ron rises, slides the door shut. Wonder what he teaches? Ron asked, frowning at Professor Lupin's pallid profile. That's obvious, isn't it? Whispered Hermione. There's only one vacancy, isn't there? Defense against the dark arts. Yuki, Harry, Ron, and Hermione had already had 2 defense against the dark arts teachers, both of whom had only lasted 1 year. There were rumors that the job was jinxed. Well, I hope he's up to it, said Ron doubtfully. He looks like one good hex would finish him off, doesn't he? Anyway, Dash, what were you going to tell us? Har? Yuki asked, turning to the boy, who looked away from her like he wasn't just admiring her from the side. Harry told them everything that Mr. Weasley told him about Sirius Black is after him because of Voldemort. Storm clouds, like dark ghosts, toss sheets of rain onto the Scarlet Engine as it heads north. Yuki, Ron, and Hermione stare at Harry, faces stricken in the lantern light that now glows in the compartment. Crookshanks slumbers in his cage. Let me get this straight. Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban to come after you. Yes. Harry nodded. But they'll catch Black, won't they? Eventually, everyone is looking for him, even Muggles. Yuki shrugged, looking away from the rain falling down. This is one of the largest manhunts that the Ministry has ever seen, Uncle Xenophilius told me, but no one has ever escaped out of Azkaban before. There is 1 in a million chance, Dash. Ron and Hermione turned to Yuki. Thanks N/N, Harry uttered as Yuki sent him a small smile. Just then, the compartment rattles, Lanterns flickered as the train lurches begin to slow down. Yuki slides down the seat, pinning Harry against Professor Lupin. Harry's hand went around Yuki's waist as they exchanged an awkward glance, and Yuki carefully slides to the end of the seat. Hermione glanced down her watch and frowns. The rain thickened as the train sped yet further north. The windows were now a solid, shimmering gray, which gradually darkened until lanterns flickered into life all along the corridors and over the luggage racks. The train rattled, the rain hammered, the wind roared, but still, Professor Lupin slept. "We must be nearly there," said Ron, leaning forward to look past Professor. "Why are we stopping? We can't be there yet." Harry rises, slides open the door, peers into the corridor. "What's going on?" Ron asked. "Dunno. Maybe we've broken down." Harry shrugged as he sat back down next to Yuki. "Ouch! Ron, that was my foot." Squeak, squeak, squeak. Ron, a dark silhouette against the window, wipes a patch of condensation from the window. "There's something moving out there. I think people are coming aboard." Suddenly, the car sways violently right itself. The metal window trim at Ron's fingertips begins to vibrate and freeze up. It's CC Cold Dash," Yuki stuttered, as a soft crackling fills the car and flames bloom in the hands of Professor Lupin. In the shivering light, his face looks tired and gray, but his eyes are alert. Wary. "Don't move." A hand limey and scabbed a hand of death grips the half-open compartment door, pushes it aside, reveals a towering, cloaked figure, its face hidden beneath its black hood. Crookshanks's hair rises and it hisses. "Hush!" The folds of the hood tremble. A chill, rattling intake of air is heard. The flames in Lupin's hand sputter. A sound swells in Yuki's ears. Eerie. But for Harry, a woman screams and Harry's eyes roll up, eyelids fluttering. And then, a silvery white light drifts from his mouth. The world spins off its axis, and Harry falls, glasses tumbling hard to the ground then. Harry, the muscles of his jaw twitching. Yuki, Hermione, Ron, and awoken Professor Lupin sat around waiting for Harry to awaken from his blackout. What happened to him? Yuki asked the professor as Crookshanks sat on her lap. "It was a Dementor. He should be okay," Lupin hesitantly said, looking at Harry laying down. "I mean, he's breathing." Ron broke the tension. Harry, are you all right?" Hermione asked as Yuki's face hovers above him, seeing if he was alive. He nodded, sitting up. Ron, pale, nervous, extends his hand. Harry's glasses. "Thanks." Harry slips them on, discovers the cold sweat glazing his brow. Snap! Professor Lupin breaks a ragged triangle of chocolate off the slab in his hands. Holds it out. "Chocolate. Eat. It'll help." "What was that thing?" Harry asked. "That attacked me?" Lupin looked over at the compartment door with a nod. "A Dementor, one of the guards of Azkaban. It's gone now," Lupin explained to the boy as Harry frowns in confusion. Apparently, it was searching the train for Sirius Black. Yuki softly spoke as she sat next to the boy, who now sitting up. "I need to have a word with the driver." "Excuse me." Lupin got up and looked at Harry and Yuki, but pointed at the chocolate in Harry's hand. "Eat. It'll help." As he leaves, Harry turns to Yuki, Ron, and Hermione. "What happened to me?" "Well, you sort of went rigid. We thought maybe you were having a fit or something." Ron explained. "We didn't know what to do." Yuki nodded. Harry turned to each of them. "And did any of you, pass out?" The three of them shook their head. "No, but it felt quite odd, really odd." Yuki spoke, like I'd never been cheerful again. "But no," Ron continued. Harry turns to Hermione. She shakes her head. "I was trembling, cold, but then Professor Lupin made it go away. But someone was screaming. A woman." Yuki, Hermione, and Ron glanced nervously at each other. "No one was screaming, Harry." Harry looked over to the window where he looked at his reflection. "I'm going to go and check up on Luna," Yuki said as she stood up, putting the newspaper to the side, as Harry stood up as well. "Independent Illinois comes along. Tita gets more chocolate." Harry stuttered as Yuki nodded. "Didn't think I poisoned it, Harry?" Lupin mentioned as he walked past the compartment once more. The two exchanged looks. "No." Harry spoke before the 2/3 years walked out of the compartment, and walked towards Luna's compartment not that far from theirs. Yuki studied the way Harry looked for a second. "Harry, you look dreadful." Yuki truthfully stated as Harry turned to her. Harry nodded, fixing his glasses. "Thanks." Yuki skipped forward as Harry smiled a little at the girl before following her. "You heard your mother?" Yuki asked, turning to Harry as he looked at her. "Again." "Yeah, I think. Well, I'm sorry." Yuki never told Harry anything about her father, but Hermione was the only one who knew in her friend group. Her father was a touchy subject just because she witnessed it, and that trauma stuck with her and made her more loony. "Don't be dash." Yuki intertwined her and Harry's hands as she pulled him towards Luna's compartment. She opened the door, and Luna was reading a book. "Hello, Luna, Yuki griti." "Hello, Yuki," and Harry Luna smiled, moving the book as she sat in the compartment alone. "I was just coming to check to see if you were okay." Yuki spoke. Luna nodded. "It was just chilling, but everything is fine with me." "What about you both?" "Fine, Harry spoke with a small nod. "I'll see you later." Luna nodded as Yuki got ready to walk out. "Oh." Yuki she turned to see Luna once more. "Narbles should be out." "So, hide what you don't want to lose, Yuki nodded, thanking Luna as she and Harry walked out. "What are Nargles?" Harry asked, turning to Yuki. She shook her head, not saying anything to Harry, as the two went towards the trolley to grab Harry some more chocolate. The two walked over to the trolley lady. Harry got another piece of chocolate as they walked back to the compartment. "How was your summer?" "With the Dursleys?" Yuki asked Harry as he took a bite from his chocolate. "Terrible. At least I was able to stay in my room the whole time, until Marge came over." Harry mentioned taking another bite from the chocolate. "You?" "I read your letter." "How are you feeling?" "Better. Uncle Xenophilius gave me this potion that made me feel way better, but turned my fingers blue for a little dash." Yuki looked down at her hands. "But at least I'm okay." She spoke, looking at Harry. He was concerned a little before just nodding. "So you were staying at the Leaky Cauldron? Did you have their soap?" she asked. Harry shook his head. "No." "Good. I heard it could eat you before you can finish it. My great-great-grandfather tried it once. Let's say he was missing a finger after." Yuki said, turning to Harry. "I learn more about you every day, Harry uttered. Yuki chuckled softly before continuing to walk towards the compartment. Once she walked back and Hermione and Ron were sitting down. "We're back." Harry got more chocolate, Yuki announced as she sat in the compartment. "I don't think Professor Lupin would poison it." "He seemed to know you?" Hermione spoke, turning to Harry. "He seemed odd." Ron noticed. Yuki shook her head. "Well, we should give him a shot before judging him. Maybe he could actually be a normal teacher and stay," she pleaded. "That position is differently hexed," Ron uttered as Harry sat back down, thinking about the voice he heard in his head. The three of them nodded as Harry wasn't paying attention. The four of the third years were on the carriages being pulled by Thestral, some creatures that Yuki could sadly see, skeleton-shaped horses you could only see if you experienced seeing death, like Luna, who watched her mother pass, and Yuki, who watched her father get killed in front of her. Yuki sat in her Gryffindor robes with spectrospecs on the top of her head, next to Harry. "Are we almost there? Honestly, I'm starving." Ron spoke, looking in front of the carriage to see nothing pulling it. Yuki shook her head, as the castle wasn't in clear view yet. "Do you do anything other than eat?" "Ronald," Hermione asked, turning to Ron as he nodded his head and moved away from the girl who was holding Crookshanks in her arms. "Harry has said nothing since the whole Dementor attack." "Hey, if you need more chocolate, I have extra," Yuki whispered to Harry as he turned to her and nodded. "Thanks." He sent her a small smile, which she returned before turning back to the landscape surrounding Hogwarts. At the high table in the Great Hall, Lupin sits with Snape, McGonagall, Hagrid, and Dumbledore, looking at the choir, singing to the strains of a harpsichord and holding toads, one of them belonging to Neville Longbottom. Flitch, Hogwarts caretaker, stands grimly to the side as, red-eyed, Mrs. Norris switches her tail at his feet. As the choir's song concludes, Dumbledore rises, beaming over the sea of black hats. "Welcome. Welcome to another year at Hogwarts. I have a few things to say before we become befuddled by our excellent feast. I myself am particularly looking forward to the flaming kiwi cups, which, while somewhat treacherous for those of us with facial hair." McGonagall cleared her throat as Harry and Yuki exchanged looks and turned back to the headmaster. "Yes. First, I'm pleased to welcome Professor R.J. Lupin. who has kindly consented to fill the post of defense against the dark arts. Good luck to you, Professor. People started to applause. Yuki, Harry, Ron, and Hermione clapped the loudest. Of course. That's why he knew to give you the chocolate, Harry. Potter, Potter, Malfoy called from behind Harry and Ron. Yuki and Hermione looked behind them, causing Ron and Harry to look back at Malfoy. Is it true you fainted? I mean, you actually fainted? Malfoy teased as his fellow Slytherins fake fainted. Ron turned Harry around. Piss off, Malfoy dash. As some of you may know, Professor Kettleburn, our care of magical creatures teacher for many years, has decided to retire in order to spend more time with his remaining limbs. Fortunately, I'm delighted to announce that his place will be filled by none other than our own Rubius Hagrid. Claps and cheers started to erupt as Hagrid turns ruby red, rises, and nearly topples the staff table, sending water goblets weaving. Finally, on a more disquieting note, Hogwarts, at the request of the Ministry of Magic, will, until further notice, play host to the Dementors of Azkaban. A murmur of apprehension fills the hall. At the Slytherin table, Draco, flanked by the ever-present Crabbe and Goyle, catches Harry's eye, feigns a dead faint. Yuki noticed this. Don't mind them, she whispered to Harry from across the table as he turned around with a nod. Yuki was used to bully. She didn't let it get to her and didn't pay attention to it, and people calling her loony just like her cousin. Harry wished he could do the same thing. The Dementors will be stationed at the entrances to the grounds. While they are under strict orders not to enter the castle itself, you will on occasion see them as you go about your daily activities. Under no circumstances are you to approach them. It is not in the nature of a Dementor to be forgiving. Students exit the Great Hall, scale the marble staircase. Yuki, Harry, Ron, and Hermione arrive at the 7th floor landing and approach the fat lady in the portrait. Fortuna Major, Harry said as the four of them walked in. Ron went right upstairs for bed, as Hermione went to the girls' dormitory to also go to bed after a long trip back to Hogwarts. Good night, Harry Potter, Yuki softly said to them before going upstairs. Good night, N/N. Harry spoke, watching the girl follow Hermione up the steps as he turned around and went up the steps with Ron. The girls sat around in the dormitory, which had Faye, Lavender, Pavarti, Hermione, and Yuki. They were just talking as Yuki sat on her bed, putting her shoes into a shoebox so she didn't lose them. Yuki, why are you doing that? Lavender giggly asked, looking at her. Yuki looked up with a small smile. Oh, Nargles, they should be out tonight. None of the girls said anything, thinking Yuki was just saying what was on her mind, like always, even if it didn't make sense. She turned back to her shoebox, drifting away from the conversation. The conversation quickly turned to crushes. Cedric Diggory is the new Hufflepuff caption dash. He's so cute dash. Yuki furrowed her eyebrows and didn't listen to the conversation. I will die to have Harry look at me the way he looks at Yuki dash. The girl looked up, confused, and turned to Pavarti, who said that. She looked away as Yuki got up and started to get ready for bed, ignoring what Pavarti had said about Harry looking at her. She just wanted to be friends with Harry, not ruining anything. Crushes and relationships weren't her things. If they were, then maybe Fred would have gotten a chance, but she is more awkward when it came to relationships. Yuki was shy if she did like someone like her fancying a Hufflepuff last year. The next day, Yuki walked into the Great Hall with no shoes on because of the Nargle or students that are hiding them. She looked around to see Hermione, Ron, and Harry sitting with Fred and George Weasley. Twins, identical twins. Yuki still has trouble telling them apart, but it's easy since Fred is the one that fancied Yuki since the first year when she told him about the stars for his astronomy homework. George, on the other hand, is the twin that has Fred's back and encourages him, knowing his twin wouldn't stop. He was also the calmer twin, to say the least. She and Harry make quick eye contact as Pavarti's voice played in her head about the way Harry looked at her. Good morning, everyone dash. Yuki greeted with a small smile and dreamy voice. People said good morning at different times. New third-year timetables, said George, passing them over. What's up with you, Harry? Yuki looked down at her timetable. What you got? Fred asked, looking over to the girl. Divination dash. She uttered, not making eye contact with Fred, not because she was being rude, but eye contact and being close to another person usually made her very uncomfortable. She admitted that most people found her annoying and loony, but it didn't bother her. Good luck, she's a bit mad, Fred whispered to her as she shook her head. She turned back to the conversation that the others were having. Malfoy, said Ron, sitting down on George's other side and glaring over at the Slytherin table. George looked up in time to see Malfoy pretending to faint with terror. Again, that little git, he said calmly. He wasn't so cocky last night when the Dementors were down our end of the train. Came running into our compartment, didn't he, Fred? Nearly wet himself, said Fred, with a contemptuous glance at Malfoy. All of them turned and looked at Malfoy, who was smirking. I wasn't too happy myself, said George. They're horrible things, those Dementors, sort of freezing your insides, don't they, said Fred. You didn't pass out, though, did you? Said Harry in a low voice. Forget it, Harry, said George bracingly. Dad had to go out to Azkaban one time, remember Fred? And he said it was the worst place he'd ever been. He came back all weak and shaking. They suck the happiness out of a place, Dementors. Most of the prisoners go mad in there. I didn't really expect it to be sunshine and rainbows, Yuki wittingly stated before seeing Neville walking over to Ginny. She got up going over to the boy. Neville Dash, she called. He stopped walking and turned to Yuki with a warm smile. Good morning, Yuki, Neville greeted, looking at the girl standing in front of him. Good morning, Neville. I charmed the plant that I got for your birthday. Just thought I should say something just in case, Dash, Yuki said, looking at Neville as he nodded. Thanks again, Dash. No problem. Harry looked over at the two talking as he looked down and continued to eat his food before they all had class. Yuki walked back over to the tables before looking at her schedule once more. Ron shook his head, furrowing his eyebrows. Wait, Yuki and Hermione, you both have more classes than Harry and I. Ron spoke. Well, we have OWLS in 2 years. Might as well start studying, Dash, Yuki stated, looking down and continuing to eat her breakfast. Harry, Ron and Yuki sit on fat little puffs in a murky, incense-laden room, along with Neville, Dean, Seamus, Lavender Brown, Parvati Patil, and others. Yuki right away took out her book and paid attention. Welcome, my children. In this room, you shall explore the mysterious art of divination. In this room, you shall discover if you possess. A crimson scrim flutters in Professor Trelawney, Divination. Professor glides dramatically into the room, eyes huge and bug-like behind enormous glasses. The sight. Hello, I am Professor Trelawney. Together, we shall cast ourselves into the future. But know this, one either has the gift or not. I cannot divine it from the pages of a book. Books only cloud one's inner eye. What a load of rubbish. Hermione appeared out of the air as Ron spins. Frowns at Hermione. Hermione told Yuki basically everything, so once she got her hands on the time turner, Yuki knew about it, meaning they both could be in 2 places at once. Where'd you come from? Ron did a double take looking at Hermione. Me? I've been here all along. She tucked the time turner under her shirt as Yuki turned back to Professor Trelawney. Yuki believed in the act of divination. She thinks, what is there not to believe in a magical world like the wizarding world? Divination was another interest to Yuki, the art of predicting the future. You boy, is your grandmother well? Trelawney turned to Neville with her arms out wide. I think so. Neville stuttered as Trelawney looked down at Neville's cup and then put it back hesitantly. I wouldn't be so sure of that. The first term will be devoted to the reading of tea leaves. If all goes well, we will proceed to palmistry, fire omens, and finally, the crystal ball. By the way, dear, beware a red-haired man, Parvati eyes Ron dubiously. Edges her puff away. Yuki looked up from her book with everything about divination as Trelawney looked around the classroom. Unfortunately, classes will be disrupted in February by a nasty bout of flu. I myself will lose my voice. And in late spring, one of our numbers will leave us forever. As the class exchanges uneasy glances, Trelawney smiles brightly and Yuki seemed to be in her own head. Well then, shall we? Inside, a cloud of tea leaves oddly. Harry sitting opposite Ron now as Hermione and Yuki sat opposite from each other. Yuki looked at her cup and tried to figure it out. Trelawney walks amongst them, robes flowing. Broaden your minds, my dears, and allow your eyes to see beyond. Trelawney takes Lavender Brown's cup peers inside. A 5-leaf clover. You can expect to wake with a horrible rash tomorrow morning, dear. Everyone turned to Lavender, whose eyes widened, and she looked back down at her book. Mr. Longbottom, after you've broken your first cup, ka-kink. Neville fumbles the cup in his hands, and the brittle crash of china. Would you be so kind as to select one of the blue ones? I'm rather partial to the pink. She passed by Ron. The three of them looked at after she stopped in front of him. What do you see in Mr. Potter's cup, Mr. Weasley? Well, he's got a wonky sort of cross. That's trials and suffering. But this lot here could be the sun. That's great happiness. So, he's going to suffer, but be very happy about it. Professor Trelawney takes the cup, peers inside, and gasped, causing everyone to turn to her. Ah, what is it, Professor? Pavarti asked. Trelawney regards Harry with a mixture of pity and fear. My dear boy, you have the Grim. Yuki flipped through her book as she landed on the page about the Grim. Turning to Harry, he looked down at her book. The Grin? What's the Grin? Seamus asked everyone in the class, but Pavarti made him quiet. Not the Grin, you idiot. The Grim. Pavarti sassed. But what does it mean, Professor? Dean asked. The Grim. All turn. See Lavender bent over her textbook. Taking the form of a giant spectral dog, it is among the darkest omens in our world. It is an omen of death. Harry peers into his cup. The tea leaves shift. The dog disappears. And a new image emerges slowly. Sirius Black. The four of them emerge from the bridge and make their way toward Hagrid's hut. The Whomping Willow looms in the distance. Death omens. Honestly, if you ask me, divination's a very woolly discipline. Now, ancient runes. That's a fascinating subject. Hermione joked. Yuki walked next to Harry as Ron and Hermione chatted back and forth. Harry, are you worried about the Grim? Yuki sweetly asked, looking over at Harry. Don't know if I should be? Harry noticed the girl wasn't next to him anymore as he looked back at her petting a bunny rabbit that was sitting on her feet. He admired the girl for a second before walking over to her, meeting up with Ron and Hermione in a second. Yuki was muttering to the rabbit. I remember seeing a black dog before I went to the Leaky Cauldron Dash, Harry mentioned. Yuki awkwardly avoided eye contact. Yeah, I know one of Ron's relatives died from seeing the Grim. I know that didn't help, but you know who was trying to kill you every year? The girl mumbled before standing up and letting the bunny jump away. We should head to Magical Creatures Dash. Harry nodded, and the who of them walked down towards Hagrid's hut. Are your feet cold? No, not really. Luna was right about the nargles. I have to go looking for my shoes later. Dash. Students gather around Hagrid as Yuki and Harry meet back up with Ron and Hermione. Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle stand with the Slytherins. Come on now, get a move on. Got a real treat for ya. Great lesson coming up. Follow me. Hagrid leads them toward a small paddock just this side of the Forbidden Forest. In the paddock, a freestanding iron rack hangs with dead ferrets and buzzing flies with the nearby pumpkin patch. Gather round. Find yourself a spot. That's it. Now, first thing you'll want to do is open your books. Yuki looked down at the book and stroked the spin, being one of the only students to know how to do so. And exactly how do we do that? Draco asked, looking at Hagrid. Hagrid looks. Belts, rope, spellotape. Any means available have been employed to bridle the monster book of monsters, which quivers violently. Crikey. Didn't you know? All you got to do is stroke him. Look. Hagrid takes Hermione's copy, snaps the spellotape, binding it. As it begins to bite, Hagrid calmly runs a forefinger down the book's spine, and it shivers, falls quietly open. Hagrid glances at the class, looking suddenly unsure. Right then. So, you got your books, and now you need the magical creatures. Right. So, I'll go and get him. Hagrid turns, disappears into the trees. Draco shakes his head, speaks loudly to Crabbe and Goyle. Neville strokes the spin as he gets attacked by the book. Don't be a wimp, Longbottom, Malfoy joked as they walked to the side. Yuki walked over to Neville and helped the boy up and opened his book for him. Thanks. No problem. Dash. God, this place is going to the dogs. Wait until my father hears. Dumbledore's got this oaf teaching classes. Draco said as his gang of Slytherins laughed, and Yuki turned to the rock, putting her stuff down. Listen, you stupid prat, Harry snapped, looking at Draco. Eyes widened in fear. Malfoy steps back, points. Potter, there's a Dementor behind you. Harry jumped and turns in fear, and nothing was behind him. Instantly, the Slytherins make an eerie ooh sound and break up into laughter. Harry reddens, embarrassed. Hermione pulled Harry away from Draco and his friends. A strange beast emerges from the trees. It has the torso, hind legs, and tail of a horse, but the front legs, wings, and head of a giant eagle. The students step back in fear. As Yuki was almost in a trace, not noticing people standing back, then Hagrid appears, shooing the beast on. People swore she liked creatures and animals more than people. She did prefer the company of magical beasts, whom she expressed terror at the thought of them coming to harm. Gee, up there? Bo Eiffel, isn't he? There seems no consensus on this, but the students stare in wary wonder nonetheless. As Hagrid coaxes the beast to the center of the paddock, Ron stares uneasily. Hagrid, exactly what is that? A hippogriff? Oh, course. Now, the first thing you gotta know is they're proud. Easily offended hippogriffs are. Don't insult one, 'cause it might be the last thing you do. Right then. Who wants to come and say hello? The entire class steps back, even Yuki leaving Harry up front by himself. Yuki only backed up. She knew there would be a lot of chances in the future. Goodman, Harry. Harry looks around, as Yuki sent him a reassuring smile, then reluctantly approaches. This it. Easy now, stop. This here's Buckbeak, Harry. You want you let him make the first move. It's polite, see? Just take a step forward, give him a bow. And if Buckbeak bows back, Yuri allowed to touch him. Ready? Unsure, Harry nods anyway. Steps forward and bows. Buckbeak's head cocks, eagle eyes studying Harry cannily. Harry waits and waits. Back off, Harry. Back off. Harry starts to step back when Buckbeak ducks his beak. Hagrid sighs, relieved. Well done, Harry. Go on. Pet him. Tentatively, Harry reaches out, lays his hand on Buckbeak's fierce beak. The class claps as Harry smiled, pleased with himself. Look at that. I reckon he might let you ride him. Harry's smile dropped, turning to Hagrid. Excuse me? We'll just set you behind the wing joint. Mind you don't pull any feathers out. Do one like that. Hagrid lifts Harry high, drops him on a Buckbeak's back, and before Harry's settled, slaps Buckbeak's hindquarters. Off you go. As Buckbeak gallops forward, Harry slides scarily back, giant wings unfold. Huge and powerful, and they soar into the air, rising higher and higher. Gradually, Harry loosens his hold on Buckbeak's neck, losing himself in the joy of flying. Smiling at the sight of his and Buckbeak's shadow racing across the grass below, circling over the Whomping Willow, past Hogwarts Castle, and then swooping with heart-stopping speed over the Black Lake. Buckbeak's talons tickling the smooth glass of the water, summoning the giant squid to the surface briefly. Hagrid whistles then, and Buckbeak wheels, beating his way back to the paddock, galloping to a halt. As Harry slides off, the class cheers, all except Draco, who narrows his eyes maliciously, and Yuki softly clapped with a smile. Good work, Harry. Hagrid turning to Harry under his breath. How am I doing me first day? Brilliant, Professor. They both grin when Draco pushes past them roughly, strides toward Buckbeak. Give me a go at that thing. If Potter can do it, it must be easy. You're not dangerous at all, are you? You great ugly brute. Malfoy. No. In a flash, Buckbeak's steely talons slash down. Malfoy freezes, look down at the blood blossoming on his robes, and shrieks. Instantly, Harry dashes forward. Buckbeak whips around, raises its talons, and seeing Harry lowers them, ducks at the beak. Harry realized what he's done, breathes. It's killed me. It's killed me. Calm yourself. You're fine. Just a scratch. Hagrid looks. A deep gash glistens on Draco's limp arm. Hagrid. He's got to be taken to a hospital. Hermione hushed forward, looking at Hagrid. I'll go with you if you like. Yuki's calm voice echoed as Hagrid shook his head. No. I'm a teacher. You all just. Class dismissed. Yuki, mind taking Busey back to my hut? Yuki nodded, and with that, Hagrid looking shaken swoops up Malfoy, flops him over his shoulder, and lumbers toward the castle. Yuki walked over to Buckbeak, bowing, and etc. Right away, Buckbeak hit its beak as Yuki grabbed the chain and softly put it around Buckbeak. That was wicked, Harry. Ron rushed up to Harry. Honestly, you should be careful, with the grim. Hermione joked with a chuckle as Ron rolled his eyes, actually worried about it. Hermione looked over to Yuki, who was bowing and petting Buckbeak. I'll go with Yuki, Hermione said, turning to Ron and Harry as the raven-haired boy shook his head. I'll go. Because Buckbeak knows me already. See you two at the Great Hall dash. Yuki started to lead Beak back towards Hagrid's hut. That was quite brave of you. Yuki grinned, looking over at Harry. Meaning, because you could die anytime soon because of the grim dash. She was serious, believing in the grin. Harry just nodded, used to Yuki being truthful. You could have done it with me? Harry turned to the girl as she shook her head. I'll have millions of chances in the future, and knowing magizoologist seems quite easy for me to do, so dash. Yuki mentioned, looking at Harry. I'm pretty sure Newt has one, she uttered, turning around. The two walked to Hagrid's hut as Yuki tied the chain to the pole. Well, I have astronomy. I'll see you later dash. Yuki skipped towards the castle, leaving Harry behind. As Lavender and Parvati huddle over a dozen teacups, avidly interpreting patterns in hushed voices, Draco, arm bound in a sling, holds court before a clod of Slytherins. Does it hurt terribly, Draco? Pansy Parkinson asked, looking over at Draco. It comes and goes. Still, I consider myself lucky. According to Madame Pomfrey, another minute or two, and I could have lost the arm. Harry, Ron, and Hermione watched from the Gryffindor table as Yuki didn't pay attention and looked down at the book of the magical creatures. The little git. He's really laying it on thick, isn't he? Ron uttered, turning back around. Buckbeak could have clawed Malfoy's eyes out. Yuki spoke as they turned to her, and she shrugged, looking down at the book, once more flipping the page. Just a thought dash. At least Hagrid didn't get sacked, Harry mentioned as Yuki looked up. Yes, but I hear Draco's father's furious. I don't think we've heard the end of this. He's been cited. They turn. Seamus and the other Gryffindors are huddled over a copy of the Daily Prophet. Oh, but the photograph on the Prophet's front page provides a chilling answer. Sirius Black. Hermione reads, over the shoulders of others, whispers half to herself. Akinti? That's not far from here. It's near Hogsmeade, Yuki said, looking at the newspaper that was in front of them. Isn't it? People nodded as they looked back down at the newspaper. You don't think he'd come to Hogwarts, do you? Neville asked, looking around the table. Everyone turned to him as Lavender shook her head. With the Dementors at every entrance? Lavender questioned, turning to everyone as Harry stood behind Yuki as the bracelet that she made for him was clear in view. Dementors? He's already slipped by them once, hasn't he? Who's to say he can't do it again? As a flicker of fear passes through Harry's face, Bames stares grimly at the grainy image of Black. That's right. Black could be anywhere. It's like trying to catch smoke. Like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. Yuki didn't like the Daily Prophet. Her uncle always told her and Luna that they don't publish things that people need to know. Beautiful flowers gleam in the dawn light, then slowly begin to wither. The dew freezes, the grass grows brittle. Seconds later, the Dementors sweep by. A tall wardrobe rattles violently as Yuki, Harry, Ron, and several classmates regard it warily. Yuki stared at it, interested. Intriguing, yes? Would anyone like to venture a guess as to what's inside? It's a Boggart, Yuki answered as Lupin looked at her and nodded. Very good, Miss Sterling. Can anyone tell us what a Boggart looks like? No one knows. Ron jumps, glances at Hermione, then whispers to Harry and Yuki. When'd she get here? Ron asked as Yuki shrugged, turning back to Professor Lupin. Hermione was now sitting next to Ron and Yuki as she looked at Professor Lupin standing in front of the Boggart. Boggarts are shapeshifters. They take the shape of whatever a particular person fears most. That's what makes it so terrifying, yes? Luckily, a very simple charm exists to repel a Boggart. Let's practice it now, shall we? Without wands, please. Ridiculous. Everyone took a second and then repeated him. Ridiculous. It's this class that's ridiculous. Draco uttered as his friends nodded. Lupin didn't mind the boy and continued on with his lesson. Yuki had ignored them and tried to focus on the class that was going on in front of her. Good. So much for the easy part. You see, The incantation alone is not enough. What really finishes a Boggart off is laughter. You need to force it to assume a shape you find truly amusing. Neville, come up here, will you? Neville eyes the rattling wardrobe. Step forward queasily. What would you say is the thing that frightens you most? The boy mumbled something looking down that no one heard. Sorry, Neville, I didn't quite catch that dash. Lupin leaned in forward. Professor Snape. Everyone laughs but Yuki and Hermione, who exchanged looks as Yuki hit Harry's shoulder softly. It's not funny how Snape tried to kill Trevor the other day, Yuki mentioned as Harry nodded and stopped laughing listening to her. Yes. Neville, I believe you live with your grandmother? Correct? Yes, but I don't want the Boggart to turn in her either, Neville uttered looking down at the floor as Lupin shook his head. It won't, but I want you to picture her clothes, only her clothes, very clearly in your mind. Can you do that? Neville nodded as he closed his eyes. She carries a red handbag. Lupin shook his head. That's fine. We don't need to hear it. If you see it, we will. Now, when I open this wardrobe, Neville, here's what I want you to do. Lupin leans close to Neville, whispers. Picture Snape in your grandmother's clothing. Neville's eyes pop open in shock. Consider Lupin uncertainly. You can do this, Neville. Neville nods nervously, takes a deep breath. Right then, wand at the ready. 1, 2, 3. Sparks jet from Lupin's wand, strike the doorknob, and the wardrobe bursts open. Instantly, Snape appears, eyes flashing hideously as he stalks forward. Neville backs away in fright. Think, Neville. Think, are ridiculous. Crack. Snape stumbles in a flash of light and reappears in a long, lace-trimmed dress, towering moth-eaten hat, and crimson handbag. Right away the class started to laugh as Yuki grinned with a lip bite. Neville blinks, amazed, then slowly grins himself. Lupin drops the needle on an old gramophone. As scratchy rumba fills the room, everyone got into one line pushing past, but Yuki calmly went to the back of the line to not put up a fight. Ron, forward. Snape dissolves into a mad, whirling mass, then mutates into a giant spider. As Ron gasped Yuki, Hermione and Harry exchanged looks. Lupin puts his hands on Ron's shoulders to steady him. Ron raises his wand. Ridiculous. Crack. Roller skates materialize on the spider's hairy feet, and it begins to shuffle crazily in place. Instantly, Ron relaxes as the class laughter rings out. Parvati. As Parvati steps up, the spider spins faster and faster. A dizzying blur then reappears as a vampire. Ridiculous. As the vampire whips its cloak across its eyes, the cloak reopens. The class laughs as the vampire was dressed differently. As it begins to shimmy about against its will, the class starts to collapse. Mr. Thomas. As Dean steps up, the vampire's undulating body attenuates, its skin darkening with diamond-thatched scales, becoming a giant cobra. Ridiculous. The cobra's hooded head bobs back and forth, transforms into a jack-in-a-box. Lupin grins next. Everyone looked at Yuki, whose turn it was. The jack-in-a-box moved back and forth before turning into her father's corpse when it fell to the ground that night. Yuki. The screams echoed in her head as Lupin looked over at the girl. Yuki, you got this, dash. She pointed her wand forward. Ridiculous, dash, she said as the corpse turned into a test dummy as it stood up moving back and forth. Everyone didn't say anything, not knowing about Yuki's past. She walked over to the side and sat with Ron. Ron wrapped his arm around Yuki, making sure she was okay. It was like a nightmare that kept playing in her head. Suddenly, she was tired. Yuki, do you want to talk about it? Ron asked, turning to her. She shook her head with a smile that hid it all no matter what. I'm fine. Oh, look, it's Harry's turn, dash, she dreamingly spoke. Yuki didn't let her father's passing get her down, since she will always have a mother no matter what. She turned to Harry, who walked forward. The test dummy, its face tumbling toward Harry, becoming more sinister, transforming into a Dementor. Suddenly, Lupin turns the music down. Harry starts to raise his wand, then freezes, transfixed. The Dementor looms closer and closer when Lupin steps between, snaps his wand. Here, crack. The Dementor vanishes and a roiling mist appears, which becomes clouds, and something started to glow among the clouds. Yuki furrowed her eyebrows confused, just like half of the class. Ridiculous. The orb deflates like a punctured balloon, whizzes crazily about the room, then darts back into the wardrobe. The door slams shut, and the class cheers. Yuki looked at Harry, who was staring at the wardrobe. Well done, everyone. I think that's enough for today. As the students exit, chattering loudly, only Harry, subdued, remains behind. At the doorway, Lupin glances back, exchanges a private glance with him, and looked over making sure Yuki was okay, which she looked okay, and carefree like always. Yuki, Ron, and Hermione looked at Harry. She walked over to Harry and slid her hand into his for comfort, which she got from it as well. Yuki started to walk as Harry looked away from the Boggart. Come on, lunch should be starting soon, Yuki said with a soft tone in her voice. Harry walked into the common room after Quidditch practice as he saw Yuki sitting on the floor in front of the coffee table, nose deep in doing astronomy homework. Hermione and Ron weren't with her as he walked over to her. Hey, he spoke. Yuki looked up from her chart and turned to Harry with a small smile, still not feeling the best from the whole Boggart incident. Hello, Harry. How was practice dash? Hard. Oliver pushed us. Now, because we are going up against Hufflepuff since Malfoy broke his arm, Harry spoke sitting down on the chair next to Yuki, who was kneeling down on the floor and doing her charts. Well, I reckon you would do brilliant like always, Dash, she said with a smile as Harry looked at her. She turned back to her charts and bit down on her bottom lip, concentrating on homework. Where is everyone else? Harry asked. Yuki pursed her lips together. Hermione went to the library to do research on Hogsmeade, and Ron was with Fred and George last time I saw him, Dash. Yuki remembered before looking down at her chart. Harry remembered that he had to do homework, but at the same time was remarkably tired. He took it out and sat right next to Yuki, hoping to get the girl to help. Mind helping me? I'm not the best at astronomy, Dash, he spoke. She nodded. The two spent half of their break as Yuki helped Harry with astronomy. What to play chess? He asked, looking at her. She looked up from her parchment. Why Harry Potter? So you can win, she asked as Harry grinned and nodded. Yuki wasn't the best at wizard chess or Quidditch, two things that Harry was good at. It's a game of logic, your favorite thing, Dash. Harry tried to convince her to try and play one round with him. You have me confused for Hermione. Her I don't play because I overanalyze it, Yuki told him as he looked at her, and she moved his face away from hers as they both chuckled. Ron walked into the common room, holding a flyer. Yuki, Dash, he walked over to the girl, seeing Harry sitting right next to her. Oh, hi, Harry. Didn't know you were here. Anyways, now that you're both here, they have Hogsmeade trip is coming up soon, Dash. Blimey, I forgot to have Uncle Vernon sign it. Not like he would, Harry announced, throwing his head back with a groan as he sat in the Quidditch uniform. Harry, you have 4 more years to go. Can't hurt to miss one. Beside Ron, I know. Hermione want to go study up on it, Yuki's calming voice said, looking at Ron. Wizard chess? Harry asked, turning to Ron as the boy nodded. The two boys went over to the game board as Yuki looked down at her homework. Hermione walked into the common room looking for Yuki. Once she found her, Yuki, did you know that Hogsmeade was founded by Hengist of Woodcroft since before 1714? Dash. No, I didn't, but thanks for the information, Yuki said, looking at Hermione. I might not go, Dash, she spoke. Why? Ron asked. I have to go and look for my missing things. They happened to go missing in the middle of the night yesterday, Dash, Yuki told him as he nodded. So I'll just stay back with Harry. Or Harry, you can ask McGonagall to sign the form if she can get you a broomstick. Reckon she can sign it for you, Dash, Ron turned to Harry as Hermione shook her head and walked overwatched the chess game going on. She thought the game was barbaric, on the other hand, not finding very much liking to wizard chess. Harry, you can't leave Hogwarts. What about Sirius Black? I'm aware, Hermione, Harry said, annoyed, looking down at the chessboard. Yuki finished her homework as she stood up and walked over to Harry, Ron, and Hermione, who was now reading, but sitting by. She looked over Harry's shoulder. Ron won. He just needs to move his queen, Dash, Yuki spoke. Harry furrowed his eyebrows. No, he doesn't. He can move 2 to get me, but I can move 1 to get his queen, Dash, Harry told her as she shrugged, sitting next to Hermione and watching it play out. Checkmate, Ron celebrated. Yuki grinned, biting her lip as Harry turned to her. Logic, Dash, she joked. 2 weeks later, near the clock tower, McGonagall was gathering the students around for the yearly Hogsmeade trip. A great buzzing queue of students, 3rd years and older, clutching a permission form, passing by a glowering Filch. Yuki was walking towards all of them, Not going to Hogsmeade. Are you sure you're not coming? Hermione asked, looking at Yuki as the girl turned to her and nodded. I have to look for my belongs once more. Nargles are differently behind a dash. Yuki whispered the last part to her friends as Harry walked over to McGonagall. Do you think she will say yes? Ron asked. Hermione shook her head as Yuki shrugged, not being sure what McGonagall was going to say to Harry. Remember, these visits to Hogsmeade Village are a privilege. Should your behavior reflect poorly on the school in any way, that privilege shall not be extended again. Harry approaches her, but before he can utter a syllable, no permission form. No visiting the village. That's the rule, Potter. Yes, Professor, but I thought if you said I could go, Harry said before he got cut off. But I don't say so. A parent or guardian must sign, and since I am neither, it would be inappropriate. With a flicker of pity, McGonagall turned to Harry one last time. I'm sorry, Potter, but that's my final word. Ron, Yuki and Hermione watching Harry expectantly from across the way see him turn, shake his head. Hermione and Ron's faces fall. Harry raises his hand in farewell, watches them go. Yuki says her bye as she skipped over to Harry. You didn't have to stay, you know that dash, Harry says turning to Yuki. I didn't stay for you. I have to go and find stuff. Might as well start looking, Yuki calmly said looking around the corridor as they started to walk back into the castle. Harry looked over at the girl as she looked away in her own world. Are you sure you don't need help? I mean, I can help dash. If I don't wind up finding them, they will find their way back. Like always, Yuki stated as she looked around avoiding eye contact. See you later. Yuki walked away to go and find some of her belongings as Harry watched her walk away. So, no Hogsmeade? Professor Lupin asked deep in the distance. Some boys skate about on brooms, tossing a ragged quaffle back and forth. Harry and Lupin were walking on the bridge together. Well, don't feel too bad. I was roundly disappointed the first time I went. Lupin explained. No, I was just trying to make you feel better. Honeydew sweets are the best in the world. Their pepper imps are so strong you smoke at the ears. And Zonko's joke shop may be dangerous, but you can't beat their stink pellets. Harry nodded slowly, looking over at him. Not to mention the Shrieking Shack, which, according to Hermione, is the most severely haunted building in Britain. Yes, that too. Lupin slowly nodded, standing next to Harry. Professor, can I ask you something? You'd like to know why I stopped you from facing the Boggart. Harry was confused but surprised that he knew he was going to ask him that. I should think it'd be obvious. I assumed the Boggart would take the shape of Lord Voldemort. Harry frowns. Lupin studies him curiously. But clearly, I was wrong. I did think of Voldemort first. But then, I remembered that night on the train. And the Dementors. Well, I'm impressed. That suggests that what you fear most of all is fear. Very wise. Before I fainted, I heard something. A woman. Screaming. Dementors force us to relive the worst memories of our lives. Our pain becomes their power. Lupin answered as Harry nodded, turning to the man looking about. Yuki thinks it might be my mother. I think so too. The night she was murdered. Harry looks up, finds Lupin studying him. Yuki's a bright girl for her age. Knew her father when he was in Hogwarts. Wonderful man. The first time I saw you, Harry, I recognized you immediately. Not by your scar. By your eyes. They're your mother Lily's. Lupin nodded, looking at him. Yes. I knew her. She was there for me at a time when no one else was. We used to talk for hours. She was not only a singularly gifted witch, but an uncommonly kind woman. She had a way of seeing the beauty in whoever she met, even. And perhaps most especially, when that person couldn't see it in themselves. Lupin's eyes glaze in memory. Then he blinks, smiles. Which perhaps explains her affection for your father. James, well, shall we say a certain talent for trouble. A gift, rumor has it, he passed on to you. Lupin turns, eyes Harry affectionately. Harry smiles vaguely. I could tell you stories, and there are many about your parents, Harry, but know this. They lived. Every moment of every day. You should know that. That's how they'd want to be remembered. Yuki was sitting at the Black Lake as she was doing her biology homework and petting creatures that came around her. Currently, she was petting a bunny rabbit as butterflies flew around her, and she looked down. There you are, Harry said as Yuki looked up. Hello, Harry Potter. She greeted up, looking up at him and avoiding eye contact. What are you doing? What it looks like I'm doing. Yuki truthfully answered as Harry sat next to the girl and looked at the lake. What were you doing? Me and Professor Lupin were talking. Did you know he knew your dad? Yuki tensed up as she looked down at the book, once more not answering Harry, with him still not knowing it was a touchy subject. No. Did you know Diricol was a plump, fluffy-feathered, and flightless magical bird, native to the island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean? Yuki asked, turning to Harry as he was confused and shook his head. No. Reckon Hagrid would show us them one day. Yuki nodded as she stood up. I think Hermione and Ron should be back. Yuki started to walk towards the castle as Harry got up following her. The hall buzzes with tales of Hogsmeade as students swap stories, sample sweets, and send soap bubbles of all shapes, sizes, and colors into the air. In the post office, it's about 200 owls, all sitting on color-coded shelves, depending on how fast you want your letter to go. And Honeydukes is brilliant. Sugar quills, flaming whiz-bees, and blood-flavored lollipops for Halloween. Harry nods, picking quietly through the spray of brilliantly colored sweets on the table as Yuki departed from the conversation as she was reading the Quibbler, seeing anything about Sirius Black, etc. Hermione notices Harry's change in behavior. But, after a while, it got a bit boring. Don't you think, Ron? Huh? Oh, yeah. Dead depressing. Hang on. I almost forgot. I got you something wicked at Dervish and Banges. It's a pocket sneakoscope. Ron places a small glass spinning top on the table. If there's someone untrustworthy around, it's meant to light up and spin. Mind you, Fred and George say it's rubbish sold for wizard tourists, but I thought, it can't hurt given that. Sirius Black's trying to kill me. Harry looks up, catching Yuki's reaction, which was worried. He grins and nods. I'm glad you had a good time. Really? And thanks for this. Rubbish or not, you're right. It can't hurt. With that, Harry pops a pepper imp into his mouth. Oh, careful of those. They'll make you're on cue, smoke curls from Harry's ears and nose, causing Yuki to laugh a little and turn back to the newspaper. Never mind. As Yuki, Harry, Ron, and Hermione climb the stairs, they find a crowd gathering on the 7th floor landing. What's happening? Yuki asked, looking up from her book and not making eye contact with anyone like normal. Only Neville ever forgets the password. Ron brought up as Yuki and Hermione shook their heads. Let me through, please. Excuse me. Thank you. I'm head boy. Back. All of you. No one is to enter this dormitory until it has been fully searched. Percy shouted at people from the top of the stairs. Yuki, Harry, Ron, and Hermione exchanged dark glances. When Ginny emerges from the crowd, her face ashen. The fat lady, she's gone. Probably stuffing her face with the apples in that still lives on the 2nd floor again. Not funny, Ronald dash, Hermione snapped, turning to him. The four of them looked up as Hermione gasped. The fat lady's portrait has been slashed viciously, great strips of canvas hanging from the frame. Just then, Dumbledore appears. Yuki grabbed Harry's hand as the two looked at each other, and then turned to the painting, but not letting go of each other's hands. Mr. Filch, round up the ghosts. Tell them to search every painting in the castle for the fat lady. Just then, there is a scream. The students dash to the landing, where all the paintings whisper fearfully. Filch's roomy eyes peer up, searching the upper shadows, then narrow. There'll be no need for ghosts, Professor. Filch extends a crooked finger. High up, near the ceiling, the fat lady cowers in a portrait not her own, trembling. Dear lady, who did this to you? Eyes like the devil he's got, and a soul as dark as his name. It was him, headmaster, the one they talk about. He's here, somewhere in the castle. Sirius Black. As the students were shaken up and whispering as Dumbledore started to look around worried. Secure the castle, Mr. Filch. The rest of you to the Great Hall. Everyone started to walk towards the Great Hall. Yuki turned to Harry as Ron and Hermione did the same. He didn't say anything but just looked concerned. Harry, are you okay? Yuki asked him as he looking over at her and nodded, looking into her Y/E/C eyes. Yeah, he shortly spoke. You're not worried that Black could be anywhere? Ron mentioned as Yuki and Hermione turned to the boy, and he shrugged. Yuki knew Ron had a point, causing her to grow worried for Harry. She turned back to the Great Hall as everyone waited for the doors to open. You know you can tell us anything, Harry, right? Hermione said to him as he nodded. I'm fine. Black can't get to me in here, Harry said with a nod. Yuki nodded as she placed her head on his shoulder, tired. He looked over at her with her eyes closed. Her breath was paced slowly, but normally. Harry, Hermione, and Ron just talked as Yuki has been more sleepy than normal. The castle was now on lockdown, as everyone was sleeping in the Great Hall, and it was silent. Harry was lying awake as Yuki slept next to him. A gentle creak is heard, and Harry's eyes shift. See Snape pass through the great doors, converge with Dumbledore. Out done the dungeons, headmaster. No sign of Black, nor anywhere else in the castle. Dumbledore nodded. I didn't really expect him to linger. Remarkable feat, don't you think? To enter Hogwarts Castle on one's own, completely undetected. Dumbledore gazes at the students, refusing to take the bait. You may recall, prior to the start of term, I did express my concerns when you appointed professor. I do not believe a single professor inside this castle would have helped Sirius Black enter it, Severus. As Snape's eyes glitter darkly, Dumbledore gazes out over the slumbering students. No, I feel quite confident the castle is safe, and I'm more than willing to let the students return to their houses. But tomorrow, for now, let them sleep. As Dumbledore's gaze finds Harry, he shuts his eyes, feigns sleep. It's astonishing what the body can endure when the mind allows itself to rest. The Whomping Willow idly casts off a few withering leaves. What villains are these that trespass upon my private lands? The fat lady has been replaced by a painting of a tiny knight called Sir Cadogan, stalking a bare stretch of grass, and his pony grazes nearby. He brandishes his sword wildly as a group of Gryffindors regard him warily. Who dares challenge Sir Cadogan? Back, you scurvy braggarts! You rogues! He's barking mad! What'd you expect? After what happened to the fat lady, none of the other pictures would take the job. Dean said, turning to Seamus. It makes sense they never cleared the castle, Yuki uttered, holding a creature's book to her chest. I believe that they wouldn't want this common room. Neville shook his head. But he keeps changing the password. Twice just this morning. I've taken to keeping a list. As Neville holds up a wrinkled piece of parchment, Yuki and Ron start to walk away, towards Harry and Hermione. Farewell, comrades. If ever you have need of noble heart and steely sinew, call upon Sir Cadogan. Yeah, we'll call you if we ever need someone mental. Ron uttered. Yuki shook her head as they walked up to Harry, who was tired but ready for the school day. So how is he? Hermione asked the two of them. I reckon that I met someone bloody loonier than N/N, Ron uttered as Yuki didn't care, since it was Ron and he was like a brother. No offense, none taken, Ronald. Yuki spoke softly before starting to walk with her friends. Reckon he could be good? I have practice. Wood's working us hard because we are going up against Hufflepuff, Harry mentioned as Yuki, Hermione, and Ron nodded. Ron and Hermione went up ahead, leaving Yuki and Harry behind. Before Harry finished, Yuki wrapped her arms around him in a comforting hug. Thanks, Good luck, hard, Yuki stated before skipping away towards Hermione and Ron. In defense against the dark arts, Yuki sat with Ron since they were the only two out of the group in class. Hermione was in Muggle studies, and Harry was at practice. Where are they? Ron asked, looking around. Let's just hope they didn't get attacked by a chupacabra. Yuki spoke, drawing a sketch of a creature in her book. And what is that? Blood-sucking creatures. Deadly if not taken care of correctly. Yuki calmly said, avoiding eye contact as she talked. Ron just nodded, looking away, but then did a double take as Yuki smiled a little, looking back down at the sketch. The door swings opened as Snape stormed into the classroom, slamming the blinds close. Bloody hell, Ron whispered, looking down. Yuki closed her sketchbook, putting it to the side. Snape pulled the screen down and turned to the class. Turn to page 394, he spoke. Harry skidded to a halt outside the defense against the dark arts classroom, pulled the door open, and dashed inside. Sorry I'm late, Professor Lupin. Snape turned to Harry like everyone else. Looks like he wasn't attacked by those things you mentioned, Ron said, looking at Harry. This lesson began 10 minutes ago. Potter, Ron, and Yuki exchanged looks, knowing that was a lie. So I think we'll make it 10 points from Gryffindor. Sit down. But Harry didn't move. Where's Professor Lupin? He said. He says he is feeling too ill to teach today, said Snape with a twisted smile. I believe I told you to sit down? But Harry stayed where he was as Yuki turned back to her books. What's wrong with him? Snape's black eyes glittered. Nothing life-threatening, he said, looking as though he wished it was. 5 more points from Gryffindor. And if I have to ask you to sit down again, it will be 50. Harry walked slowly to his seat and sat down. Snape looked around at the class. As I was saying before Potter interrupted, Professor Lupin has not left any record of the topics you have covered so far. Please, sir, we've done Boggarts, Redcaps, Kappas, and Grindylows. Hermione quickly said, appearing from nowhere and sitting next to Harry. When did she come in? Did you see her come in? Ron asked, looking around as Yuki ignored him. And we're just about to start? Be quiet, said Snape coldly. I did not ask for information. I was merely commenting on Professor Lupin's lack of organization. He's the best defense against the dark arts teacher we've ever had. Yuki stated as people started to whisper, shocked about Yuki sticking up for someone and not just sitting down. Snape looked more menacing than ever as he turned to Yuki. You are easily satisfied, just like you, ragged Father Dash. Yuki looked down as images popped in her head of that night. She tried to hold back tears that were forming. Snape smirked knowingly and turned to the class. You're sick, Ron snapped, looking up at Snape. Honestly, she didn't do anything to you. Harry snapped, not putting up with Snape. 50 points from Gryffindor. Lupin is hardly overtaxing you. I would expect first years to be able to deal with Redcaps and Grindylows. Today we shall discuss. Harry watched him flick through the textbook to the very back chapter, which he must know they hadn't covered. Yuki flipped through the pages silently. Werewolves, said Snape. But, sir, said Hermione, seemingly unable to restrain herself. We're not supposed to do werewolves yet. We're due to start hinkypunks. Miss Granger, said Snape in a voice of deadly calm. I was under the impression that I was taking this lesson, not you. And I am telling you all to turn to page 394. He glanced around again. All of you, now! With many bitter sidelong looks and some sullen muttering, the class opened their books. Which of you can tell me how we distinguish between the werewolf and the true wolf? Said Snape. Everyone sat in motionless silence. Everyone except Hermione, whose hand, as it so often did, had shot straight into the air. Yuki's hand also went up into the air. Anyone? Snape said, ignoring Hermione and Yuki. His twisted smile was back. Are you telling me that Professor Lupin hasn't even taught you the basic distinction between? Yuki furrowed her eyebrows, confused on why he keeps on bringing up Professor Lupin. We told you, said Parvati suddenly. We haven't got as far as werewolves yet. We're still on. Silence, snarled Snape. Well, I never thought I'd meet a third-year class who wouldn't even recognize a werewolf when they saw one. I shall make a point of informing Professor Dumbledore how very behind you all are. Please, sir, said Hermione, whose hand was still in the air. The werewolf differs from the true wolf in several small ways. The snout of the werewolf, and an animagus is a wizard who elects to turn into an animal. Yuki stated, trying to pass the class. Silence. That is the second time you have spoken out of turn, Miss Granger and Sterling, Snape said, looking at them. 5 more points from Gryffindor for being an insufferable knoll. Hermione went very red. Snape set Yuki to the edge as she put down her hand and stared at the floor with her eyes full of tears. It was a mark of how much the class loathed Snape that they were all glaring at him, because every one of them had called Hermione a know-it, all at least once, and Ron, who told Hermione she was a know-it-all at least twice a week. But to Yuki, who doesn't do anything to hurt a single human being or creature. You asked us a question, and they knew the answer. Why ask if you don't want to be told? The class knew instantly he'd gone too far. Snape advanced on Ron slowly, and the room held its breath. Detention, Weasley, Snape said silkily, his face very close to Ron's. And if I ever hear you criticize the way I teach a class again, you'll be very sorry indeed. No one made a sound throughout the rest of the lesson. They sat and made notes on werewolves from the textbook, while Snape prowled up and down the rows of desks, examining the work they had been doing with Professor Lupin. Very poorly explained. That is incorrect. The Kappa is more commonly found in Mongolia. Professor Lupin gave this 8 out of 10. I wouldn't have given it 3. When the bell rang, at last, Snape held them back. You will each write an essay, to be handed in to me, on the ways you recognize and kill. Werewolves. It clicked in Yuki's head as to why Snape was acting like this with werewolves, and that Lupin wasn't teaching it. I want 2 rolls of parchment on the subject, and I want them by Monday morning. It is time. Somebody took this class in hand. Weasley, stay behind. We need to arrange your detention. Yuki was the first to leave the class as Harry went after the girl. Yuki, Harry said as Yuki turned to him with a smile on her face, but tears coming down her eyes. Snape's comment about her father is the thing that sent her off. Harry, I think it's best me and Yuki talk. Hold on. Hermione said as Harry looked at the two, not wanting to leave, but walking away. Hermione wrapped her arms around Yuki in a hug. You have to tell Harry and Ron when you're comfortable, Hermione explained as Yuki nodded. I know. Yuki mumbled. I need to talk to Professor Lupin. Yuki walked around the whole castle until she knocked on his office door. After waiting a while, Harry went to practice, Hermione went to the library, and Ron was with Seamus. Professor Lupin. Yuki whispered, waiting for a response. The door opened as Lupin had fresh scars on his face. Hello, Yuki. I never got to apologize for the Boggart incident. Hi, Professor. It's fine. We are all scared of something, right? I can talk about that essay Snape assigned us? Yuki hesitantly spoke. Lupin nodded confusingly as he welcomed Yuki into his office. What exactly is this essay? Lupin asked, turning to Yuki as the girl sat down in front of his desk. She didn't know how to come to with the sentence, since even though he might be a werewolf, he was still a human being. Snape assigned us an essay to kill werewolves. Lupin froze, sitting down in his chair across from Yuki. He went pale and shook his head, knowing Snape would do this. Sorry, but I can't help with th. Sorry, sir. I came to tell you I wasn't comfortable writing the essay, knowing your condition. Yuki kindly stated, avoiding eye contact awkwardly. Remus nodded, knowing Yuki could tell. What gave it away? Boggart. Your name, Sir Dash. Yuki truthfully stated as Lupin chuckled, looking at the girl. Lupin is derived from the Latin lupinus, which means of a wolf. Remus is a figure from Roman mythology who was raised by a wolf. My mother, she taught me Latin last year. He nodded, impressed. You have your father's smarts. Have anyone told you that? Yuki smiled a little. Yeah. He was a friend of mine, just like Harry's parents. I also came to make sure everything was okay. Remus nodded, signaling it was okay. How did it happen, sir? If you're okay telling me. My transformations in those days were terrible. I was a very small boy when I received the bite. My parents tried everything, but in those days there was no cure. Yuki felt bad for the man as she looked at him. You're really caring, Yuki. That's why I was friends with your father. He was just the same. I should get some rest. Yuki smiled a little bit. Thanks for telling me, Professor. Your secret is safe with me. And forever will be. Yuki nodded, getting up. See you next week, Have a nice nap, Yuki stated before walking out of the man's office. Lightning strikes one of the golden Quidditch rings, and the clouds bloom with icy blue light. Far below, in the stands, rain lashes the sea, umbrellas in the stands. As one flies free, soaring end over end into the sky, the crowd explodes in cheers. Yuki was wearing a lion hat to support Gryffindor, and 2 Quidditch squads, Gryffindor in scarlet, Hufflepuff and Canary Yellow, shoot into the air. Twin bludgers fire skyward, and the match is on. Harry, rising like a rocket through the mist, his robes snapping violently in the wind. As he flies, rain falling like needles before him, every dark cloud concealing potential danger. Beaters crisscross his path. A bludger whizzes past, then a second rockets directly at him. Swoop! Harry ducks. Watch the bludger. Shudders the broom of the new Hufflepuff seeker, Cedric Diggory. The beater goes into a wild spiral, vanishes in the mist. In the stands, Yuki squints upward, clapping, the players little more than streaking blurs from her vantage. A stitch of lightning strikes the tail of Angelina Johnson's broomstick. As it bursts into flames, she plummets into the pitch. Ron looks down at his own hand. In the highly charged air, the hair above his knuckles rise. In the sky, Harry flews fearlessly, searching for the snitch as bludgers pierce the clouds about him and chasers flit in and out of everyone's view. Suddenly, in the stands opposite, a black umbrella flies from the hand of a Ravenclaw girl. For a moment, it sails wondrously through the heavy air, a magret dream, then abruptly picks up speed. Rotating like a hatchet, Harry ducks, turns, and watches it disappear into a bank of clouds. Then something glimmers in the sky, a snitch. Instantly, Harry jets off, closing fast on the tiny, glimmering ball, chasing it through on cloud. Then another and another until he breaks into a clear patch in the sky, only to find that the snitch is gone. Angrily, Harry whips the nimbus back around, searching the horizon frantically, when he spies something. In the stadium's highest tower, something enormous flickers briefly in silhouette, then is obscured by a veil of mist. Harry turns. In the distance, the stray umbrella spins into Harry's view and harpoons a play. Harry's eyes shift, the snitch shimmers like a firefly in the dark underbelly of a cloud. Harry begins to go when the veil of mist shrouding the high tower shifts, and for one brief moment, a great dog is revealed. As this mist closes, Harry frowns, jets away. As Harry pelts after the snitch, the crowd rises their feet, roaring. Yuki grin over the binoculars, watching Harry shred the mist as he urges his broom on. "Come on, faster," Ron uttered. The trace of a smile forms on Harry's lips as he closes on the snitch, only yards away, reaching out when a thin glance of ice clouds his glasses. He wipes at them, then flinches. Blood trickles down his cheek. The rain is turning to needles. Needles of ice. Harry glances at the handle of his broomstick. The water sluicing through the grain is freezing. Vapor streams from his mouth and nose. Swoosh! A dark silhouette passes on his right. He turns. A twin silhouette passes on the left. Harry sees neither. Looks down. The layers of mist are paying below. Lightning strikes. Reveals an army of silhouettes drifting onto the pitch. A vast legion of Dementors. A distant whistle weaves into the wind. Rises in the pitch. Not a whistle at all, but a scream. The woman's scream was back as Harry's eyes flutter and wisps of silvery white light float from his mouth. His glasses glaze over completely. His fingers, rigid, can no longer grip the broom, and he falls. "No!" Hermione shouted. Harry and broom tumble in opposite directions. The nimbus soars end over end, tossed by the currents, then drops right into the whomping willow. Harry in freefall drops through one cloud, then another, plummeting through the circling Dementors. Then a tall figure rises from the crowd, raises an open hand to the heavens. Eyes angry but clear. Dumbledore. An explosion more powerful than thunder rocks in the air. A flash more fierce than lightning shocks the sky. Lucky the ground was so soft. I thought he was dead for sure, but he didn't even break his glasses. "He's not dead, he's breathing." "I'm positive he wouldn't be breathing," Yuki's voice rang. Harry could hear the voices whispering, but they made no sense whatsoever. He didn't have a clue where he was, or how he got there, or what he'd been doing before he got there. All he knew was that every inch of him was aching as though it had been beaten. "That was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life." "Looks a bit peaky, doesn't he?" Ron asked, looking at Harry as everyone turned to him. The scariest thing, hooded black figures, cold, screaming. Harry's eyes snapped open. He was lying in the hospital wing. The Gryffindor Quidditch team, spattered with mud from head to foot, was gathered around his bed. Yuki, Ron, and Hermione were also there, looking as though they just climbed out of a swimming pool. "Peaky? What'd you expect him to look like?" "He fell 50 feet. Fred asked, turning to Ron from next to Yuki. "Yeah, small one. We'll walk you off the astronomy tower and see how you come out looking. Probably a right sight better than he normally does." Harry sits up so then everyone could tell that he was now awake. "Harry," Yuki uttered with a smile, glad to see he was okay. Harry turned to her wearing the lion hat and standing with Fred, who had his arm wrapped around her shoulder, trying to make his 1000th move on the girl. Hermione turned as everyone was now looking at the boy. "How are you feeling?" Hermione asked, looking at him. As Harry edges up against his pillow, a nurse in the background was removing the spokes of an umbrella from a Hufflepuff neck. "Harry didn't look so good." "Brilliant," he said with his voice laced in sarcasm. "Gave us a right good scare, mate," Fred mentioned as Harry nodded, looking around. "What happened?" Ron answered shortly as Yuki turned and nodded. Really? I meant the match. Who won? Silence. Uncomfortable glances. Hufflepuff. Cedric Diggory apparently caught the snitch and didn't notice that you fell. Yuki explained half-heartedly, with a small smile. No one blames you, Harry. The Dementors aren't meant to come on the grounds. Dumbledore was furious. After he saved you, he sent them straight off. Hermione added as they nodded. Harry nods grimly, stares at the rain in the window. There's something else you should know, Harry. Your nimbus, when it blew away, it sort of landed in the Whomping Willow. And well, Ron says he tips a bag of splintered wood and twisted twigs onto the bed. As Harry stares and nods. Okay, everyone, Mr. Potter needs rest dash. Madame Pomfrey expressed as they turned to her and nodded. Everyone started to walk out of the hospital wing. Yuki stopped and walked back over to Harry in a rush, pecking his cheek. Get better, she says before then walking away, leaving Harry bright red. Madame Pomfrey insisted on keeping Harry in the hospital wing for the rest of the weekend. He didn't argue or complain, but he wouldn't let her throw away the shattered remnants of his Nimbus 2000. He knew he was being stupid, knew that the Nimbus was beyond repair, but Harry couldn't help it. He felt as though he'd lost one of his best friends. He had a stream of visitors, all intent on cheering him up. Hagrid sent him a bunch of earwiggy flowers that looked like yellow cabbages. The Gryffindor team visited again on Sunday morning, this time accompanied by Wood, who told Harry, in a hollow, dead sort of voice, that he didn't blame him in the slightest. Ron and Hermione only left Harry's bedside at night, but Yuki would spend more time with Harry than Hermione and Ron. But nothing anyone said or did could make Harry feel any better, because they only knew half of what was troubling him. He hadn't told anyone about the Grim, Ron and Hermione, not even Yuki, because he knew Ron would panic and Hermione would scoff, and he just didn't want to bring Yuki into this. The fact remained, however, that it had now appeared twice, and both appearances had been followed by near-fatal accidents. The first time, he had nearly been run over by the night bus. The second, fallen 50 feet from his broomstick. Was the Grim going to haunt him until he actually died? Was he going to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder for the beast? And then there were the Dementors. Harry felt sick and humiliated every time he thought of them. Everyone said the Dementors were horrible, but no one else collapsed every time they went near one. No one else heard echoes in their head of their dying parents. For Harry knew who that screaming voice belonged to now. He had heard her words, heard them over and over again during the night hours in the hospital wing while he lay awake, staring at the strips of moonlight on the ceiling. I'm sorry about your broom, Harry. There's no chance of fixing it. Professor Lupin asked, turning to Harry, shakes his head in response to Lupin's question. Yuki was sitting at the Black Lake reading as the two walked around. Harry sets Hedwig free of her traces. As she soars into the sky, Harry and Lupin watch from the lake's edge. Yuki waved at the two as they waved back. Why do they affect me so, Professor? I mean, more than everyone else? Harry asked, turning to Professor Lupin. Yuki looked down and started to feed the birds the rest of the bread she had from a sandwich. There you go, Dash, she whispered to them. Dementors are among the foulest creatures that walk this earth. They feed on every good feeling, every happy memory, until a person is left with nothing but his worst experiences. You're not weak, Harry. The Dementors affect you most because there are true horrors in your past. Horrors your classmates can scarcely imagine. You have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm scared, Professor, Harry said, turning to him. Professor Lupin nodded, looking at him. Since Harry was supposed to be, it would be stupid for him not to be. Yuki started to walk over to the two of them. I'd consider you a fool if you weren't. I need to learn how to fight them. You could teach me, Professor. You made that Dementor on the train goes away. Harry explained more about it. Lupin nodded, looking at them. There was only one that night, but you made it go away. I don't pretend to be an expert, Harry. But yes, I can teach you. Perhaps after the holiday. For now, though, I need to rest. I'm feeling tired. Harry turns, studies Lupin's haggard face. A weary smile appears as Hedwig's reflection glides over Lupin's rises. You can bring Yuki if you want to, Lupin replied with a knowing smile. Harry nodded, looking at Lupin. How was James, looking at Lily? Yuki went over to the two. Hello, Professor. And Harry, Yuki greeted with a smile. Lovely day it is, she declared before skipping away without shoes on. On the Saturday morning of the Hogsmeade trip, snow was falling with Christmas around the corner. Harry bid goodbye to Yuki, who was going to Hogsmeade just to see Honeydukes, Ron and Hermione, who were wrapped in cloaks and scarves, then turned up the marble staircase alone and headed back towards Gryffindor Tower. Snow had fallen outside the windows, and the castle was still and quiet. "Psst, Harry!" He turned, halfway along the third-floor corridor, to see Fred and George peering out at him from behind a statue of a humpbacked, one-eyed witch. "What are you doing?" said Harry curiously. "How come you're not going to Hogsmeade?" "We've come to give you a bit of festive cheer before we go, and I go on my date with Yuki," said Fred with a joking wink. Harry looked around uncomfortably. "Come in here." He nodded towards an empty classroom to the left of the one-eyed statue. Harry followed Fred and George inside. George closed the door quietly and then turned, beaming, to look at Harry. "Early Christmas present for you, Harry," he said. Fred pulled something from inside his cloak with a flourish and laid it on one of the desks. It was a large, square, very worn piece of parchment with nothing written on it. Harry, suspecting one of Fred and George's jokes, stared at it. "What's that supposed to be?" Harry asked. "This, Harry, is the secret of our success," said George, patting the parchment fondly. "It's a wrench giving it to you," said Fred. "But we decided last night, your needs greater than ours. But we've decided your needs greater than ours. George, if you will." George takes out his wand and pointed it at the piece of parchment. "I solemnly swear that I am up to no good." George touches his wand to the parchment-lined surface in the fiber of the paper, spread like veins. Harry reads the curious words at the top. "Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs are proud to present the Marauder's map." Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs. We owe them so much. "Anyway, we know it off by heart," said George. "We bequeath it to you. We don't really need it anymore." "Noblemen, working tirelessly to help a new generation of lawbreakers," said Fred solemnly. "Right," said George briskly. "Don't forget to wipe it after you've used it, or anyone can read it," Fred said warningly. "Just tap it again and say, 'Mischief managed,' and it'll go blank." "So, young Harry," said Fred in an uncanny impersonation of Percy, "mind you behave yourself." "See you in Honeydukes," said George, winking. They left the room, both smirking in a satisfied sort of way. Harry stood there, gazing at the miraculous map. He watched the tiny ink Mrs. Norris turn left and paused to sniff at something on the floor. If Filch really didn't know, he wouldn't have to pass the Dementors at all, but even as he stood there, flooded with excitement, something Harry had once heard Mr. Weasley say came floating out of his memory. "Never trust anything that can think for itself, if you can't see where it keeps its brain." This map was one of those dangerous magical objects Mr. Weasley had been warning against aids to magical mischief makers, but then, Harry reasoned, he only wanted to use it to get into Hogsmeade. It wasn't as though he wanted to steal anything or attack anyone, and Fred and George had been using it for years without anything horrible happening. Harry traced the secret passage to Honeydukes with his finger. Then, quite suddenly, as though following orders, he rolled up the map, stuffed it inside his robes, and hurried to the door of the classroom. He opened it a couple of inches. There was no one outside. Very carefully, he edged out of the room and slipped behind the statue of the one-eyed witch. What did he have to do? He pulled out the map again and saw, to his astonishment, that a new ink figure had appeared upon it, labeled Harry Potter. This figure was standing exactly where the Real Harry was standing, about halfway down the third-floor corridor. Harry watched carefully. His little ink self appeared to be tapping the witch with his minute wand. Harry quickly took out his real wand and tapped the statue. Nothing happened. He looked back at the map. The tiniest speech bubble had appeared next to his figure. The word inside said Descendium. Descendium, Harry whispered, tapping the stone witch again. At once, the statue's hump opened wide enough to admit a fairly thin person. Harry glanced quickly up and down the corridor, then tucked the map away again, hoisted himself into the hole head first, and pushed himself forwards. He slid a considerable way down what felt like a stone slide, then landed on cold, damp earth. He stood up, looking around. It was pitch dark. He held up his wand, muttered, "Lumos," and saw that he was in a very narrow, low, earthy passageway. He raised the map, tapped it with the tip of his wand, and muttered, "Mischief managed." The map went blank at once. He folded it carefully, tucked it inside his robes, then, heart beating fast, both excited and apprehensive, he set off. The passage twisted and turned, more like the burrow of a giant rabbit than anything else. Harry hurried along it, stumbling now and then on the uneven floor, holding his wand out in front of him. It took ages, but Harry had the thought of honeydukes to sustain him. After what felt like an hour, the passage began to rise. Panting, Harry sped up, his face hot, his feet very cold. 10 minutes later, he came to the foot of some worn stone steps which rose out of sight above him. Careful not to make any noise, Harry began to climb. 100 steps, 200 steps, he lost count as he climbed, watching his feet. Then, without warning, his head hit something hard. It seemed to be a trapdoor. Harry stood there, massaging the top of his head, listening. He couldn't hear any sounds above him. Very slowly, he pushed the trapdoor open and peered over the edge. He was in a cellar which was full of wooden crates and boxes. Harry climbed out of the trapdoor and replaced it. It blended so perfectly with the dusty floor that it was impossible to tell it was there. Harry crept slowly towards the wooden staircase that led upstairs. Now he could definitely hear voices, not to mention the tinkle of a bell and the opening and shutting of a door. Wondering what he ought to do, he suddenly heard a door open much closer at hand. Somebody was about to come downstairs. "And get another box of jelly slugs, dear. They've nearly cleaned us out," said a woman's voice. A pair of feet was coming down the staircase. Harry leapt behind an enormous crate and waited for the footsteps to pass. He heard the man shifting boxes against the wall opposite. He might not get another chance. Quickly and silently, Harry dodged out from his hiding place and climbed the stairs. Looking back, he saw an enormous backside and a shiny bald head buried in a box. Harry reached the door at the top of the stairs, slipped through it, and found himself behind the counter of Honeydukes. He ducked, crept sideways, and then straightened up. Honeydukes was so crowded with Hogwarts students that no one looked twice at Harry. He edged amongst them, looking around, and suppressed a laugh as he imagined the look that would spread over Dudley's piggy face if he could see where Harry was now. There were shelves upon shelves of the most succulent-looking sweets imaginable. Creamy chunks of nougat, shimmering pink squares of coconut ice, fat, honey-colored toffees, hundreds of different kinds of chocolate in neat rows. There was a large barrel of every flavor beans, and another of fizzing whiz-bees, the levitating sherbet balls that Ron had mentioned. Along yet another wall were special effects sweets, Dribble's best blowing gum. The strange, splintery tooth-flossing string mints, tiny black pepper imps, ice mice, peppermint creams shaped like toads, fragile sugar-spun quills, and exploding bonbons. Harry squeezed himself through a crowd of sixth years and saw a sign hanging in the furthest corner of the shop. Ron and Hermione were standing underneath it, examining a tray of blood-flavored lollipops. Harry sneaked up behind them. "Ugh, no. Harry won't want one of those. They're for vampires, I expect," Hermione was saying. "I expect he would like this dash." Yuki spoke as she had a heart-shaped lollipop in her mouth. She picked up Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. "No. How about these?" said Ron, shoving a jar of cockroach cluster under Yuki and Hermione's nose as Yuki shook her head, grabbing the beans. Harry was pleased to see that Yuki was with the two and not with Fred, as the boy teased. "Definitely not," said Harry. Ron nearly dropped the jar, causing Yuki and Hermione to turn to them. "Harry!" Hermione squealed as Yuki hugged him. For some reason, the girl backed away awkwardly and handed Harry the beans. Ron nearly dropped the jar. "What are you doing here?" How did you—" "Wow," said Ron, looking very impressed. "You've learned to apparate. Yuki uttered, shaking her head at Ron. "Unless Harry, just aged by 4 years. Course I haven't," said Harry. He dropped his voice so that none of the sixth years could hear him and told them all about the Marauder's map. "How come Fred and George never gave it to me?" said Ron, outraged. "I'm their brother." Hermione shook his head, looking at the map. "But Harry isn't going to keep it," said Hermione, as though the idea was ludicrous. "He's going to hand it in to Professor McGonagall, aren't you, Harry?" "No, I'm not," said Harry. "I think it could help. Maybe you should keep it," Yuki said, turning to Harry, who was standing next to Ron. "Are you mad?" said Ron, goggling at Hermione. "Hand in something that good. If I hand it in, I'll have to say where I got it. Filch would know Fred and George nicked it. From his office. Harry, you should be careful, though. What if Sirius gets a hold of it?" Yuki brightly stated as Hermione nodded, looking at him. Harry shook his head. "He can't be getting in through a passage," said Harry quickly. "There are 7 secret tunnels on the map, right? Fred and George reckon Filch already knows about 4 of them. And the other 3, one of them's caved in, so no one can get through it. One of them's got the whomping willow planted over the entrance, so you can't get out of it. And the one I just came through, well, it's really hard to see the entrance to it down in the cellar. So unless he knew it was there, who made the map? Mooney, Padfoot, Prongs, and Wormtail Dash?" Yuki asked, looking down at the map, furrowing her eyebrows, honestly making her confused. "If Yuki doesn't know, Harry should keep it," Ron said as they turned to him, and Yuki furrowed her eyebrows, confused a bit by Ron's statement as she handed the map back to Harry. "Tell you what," said Ron, his teeth chattering. "Shall we go for a butterbeer and the 3 broomsticks?" Harry was more than willing. The wind was fierce and his hands were freezing, so they crossed the road, and in a few minutes were entering the tiny inn. It was extremely crowded, noisy, warm, and smoky. A curvy sort of woman with a pretty face was serving a bunch of rowdy warlocks up at the bar. "That's Madame Rosmerta," said Ron. "I'll get the drinks, shall I?" he added, going slightly red. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione made their way to the back of the room, where there was a small, vacant table between the window and a handsome Christmas tree that stood next to the fireplace. The map really interested Yuki as she was thinking about it. "Maybe you should go to Professor Lupin about it? I mean, it's his area of teaching dash." Yuki spoke, coming up with a logical response. Harry shrugged. "Maybe, but wouldn't he just take it? Just an idea dash." Ron came back 5 minutes later, carrying 4 foaming tankards of hot butterbeer. "Happy Christmas," he said happily, raising his tankard. Harry drank deeply. It was the most delicious thing he'd ever tasted and seemed to heat every bit of him from the inside. Yuki put her drink down as Harry grinned a little, looking at the girl. He traced the top of his lip, motioning on the butterbeer mustache that Yuki had. Yuki wrapped the top of her lip. A sudden breeze ruffled Harry's hair. The door of the 3 broomsticks had opened again. Harry looked over the rim of his tankard and choked. Professors McGonagall and Flitwick had just entered the pub in a flurry of snowflakes, shortly followed by Hagrid, who was deep in conversation with a portly man in a lime-green bowler hat and a pinstripe cloak. Cornelius Fudge, Minister for Magic. In an instant, Yuki and Hermione had both placed hands on the top of Harry's head and forced him off his stool and under the table. Dripping with butterbeer and crouching out of sight, Harry clutched his empty tankard and watched the teachers and Fudge's feet move towards the bar, pause, then turn and walk right towards him. Somewhere above him, Yuki shockingly whispered, "Mobiliarbus." The Christmas tree beside their table rose a few inches off the ground, drifted sideways, and landed with a soft thump right in front of their table, hiding them from view. Staring through the dense lower branches, Harry saw 4 sets of chair legs move back from the table right beside theirs, then heard the grunts and sighs of the teachers and minister as they sat down. Next, he saw another pair of feet, wearing sparkly turquoise high heels, and heard a woman's voice. "A small gillywater." "Mine," said Professor McGonagall's voice. "4 pints of mulled mead." "Ta, Rosmerta," said Hagrid. "A cherry syrup and soda with ice and umbrella." Said Professor Flitwick, smacking his lips. "So you'll be the red currant rum, Minister." "Thank you, Rosmerta, dear," said Fudge's voice. "Lovely to see you again, I must say. Have one yourself? Won't you? Come and join us." "Well, thank you very much, Minister." Harry watched the glittering heels march away and back again. His heart was pounding uncomfortably in his throat. Why hadn't it occurred to him that this was the last weekend of the term for the teachers, too? And how long were they going to sit there? He needed time to sneak back into Honeydukes if he wanted to return to school tonight. Yuki's leg gave a nervous twitch next to him as Harry turned a bright shade of pink. "So, what brings you to this neck of the woods, Minister?" came Madame Rosmerta's voice. Harry saw the lower part of Fudge's thick body twist in his chair as though he was checking for eavesdroppers. Then he said in a quiet voice, "What else, dear, but Sirius Black? I dare say you heard what happened up at the school." "I did hear a rumor," admitted Madame Rosmerta. Did you tell the whole pub, Hagrid? Said Professor McGonagall exasperatedly. Do you think Black's still in the area, Minister? Whispered Madame Rosmerta. I'm sure of it, said Fudge shortly. You know that the Dementors have searched my pub twice? Said Madame Rosmerta, a slight edge to her voice. Scared all my customers away. It's very bad for business, Minister. Rosmerta, dear, I don't like them any more than you do, said Fudge uncomfortably. Necessary precaution, unfortunate. But there you are. I've just met some of them. They're in fury against Dumbledore. He won't let the inside the castle grounds. I should think not, said Professor McGonagall sharply. How are we supposed to teach with those horrors floating around? Hear, hear, squeaked tiny Professor Flitwick, whose feet were dangling a foot from the ground. All the same, demurred Fudge, they are here to protect you all from something much worse. We all know what Black's capable of. Do you know, I still have trouble believing it, said Madame Rosmerta thoughtfully. Of all the people to go over to the dark side, Sirius Black was the last I'd have thought. I mean, I remember him when he was a boy at Hogwarts. If you told me then what he was going to become, I'd have said you'd had too much mead. You don't know the half of it, Rosmerta, said Fudge gruffly. The worst he did isn't widely known. The worst, said Madame Rosmerta, her voice alive with curiosity. Worse than murdering all those poor people, you mean? I certainly do, said Fudge. I can't believe that. What could be worse? You say you remember him at Hogwarts, Rosmerta, murmured Professor McGonagall. Do you remember who his best friends were? Madame nodded, looking at McGonagall and nodded. Naturally, said Madame Rosmerta, with a small laugh. Never saw one without the others, did you? The number of times I had them in here. Ooh, they used to make me laugh. Quite the double act. Sirius Black, James Potter, and Davis Edwards. Harry dropped his tankard with a loud clunk. Ron kicked him as Yuki sat there frozen. Hermione put her hand in her best friend's to calm her down. Precisely, said Professor McGonagall. Black, Potter, and Davis. Ringleaders of their little gang. Both dazzling, of course exceptionally bright, in fact, but I don't think we've ever had such a trio of troublemakers. I dunno, chuckled Hagrid. Fred and George Weasley could give him a run for their money. You'd have thought Black and Potter were brothers, chimed in Professor Flitwick. Inseparable. Davis was closer to Remus. Them two were like brothers. Of course they were, said Fudge. Potter trusted Black beyond all his other friends. Nothing changed when they left school. Black was the best. Man, when James married Lily, then they named him godfather to Harry. Harry has no idea, of course. You can imagine how the idea would torment him. Black was there with Yuki every second of his life since she was born. Davis, however, made Lovegood the godfather of Yuki, seeing he was his brother-in-law because Black turned out to be in league with you-know-who, whispered Madame Rosmerta. Worse even than that, dear. Fudge dropped his voice and proceeded in a sort of low rumble. Not many people are aware that the Potters knew you-know-who was after them. Dumbledore, who was, of course, working tirelessly against you-know-who, had a number of useful spies. One of them tipped him off, and he alerted James and Lily at once. He advised them to go into hiding. Well, of course, you-know-who wasn't an easy person to hide from. Dumbledore told them that their best chance was the Fidelius charm. How does that work? Said Madame Rosmerta, breathless with interest. Professor Flitwick cleared his throat. An immensely complex spell, he said squeakily, involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person or secret keeper and is henceforth impossible to find, unless, of course, the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you-know-who could search the village where Lily and James were staying for years and never find them, not even if he had his nose pressed against their sitting room window. So Black was the Potter's secret keeper, whispered Madame Rosmerta. Naturally, said Professor McGonagall. James Potter told Dumbledore that Black would die rather than tell where they were, that Black was planning to go into hiding himself, and yet Dumbledore remained worried. I remember him offering to be the Potter's secret keeper himself. He suspected Black? Gasped Madame Rosmerta. He was sure that somebody close to the Potters had been keeping you-know-who informed of their movements, said Professor McGonagall darkly. Indeed, he had suspected for some time that someone on our side had turned traitor and was passing a lot of information to who. But James Potter insisted on using Black? He did, said Fudge heavily. And then, barely a week after the Fidelius charm had been performed, Black betrayed them? Breathed Madame Rosmerta. They nodded, looking at him. He did indeed. Black was tired of his double agent role. He was ready to declare his support openly for you-know-who, and he seems to have planned this for the moment of the Potter's death. But, as we all know, you-know-who met his downfall in little Harry Potter. Powers have gone. Horribly weakened, he fled. And this left Black in a very nasty position indeed. His master had fallen at the very moment when he, Black, had shown his true colors as a traitor. He had no choice but to run for it. Filthy, stinking turncoat, Hagrid said, so loudly that half the bar went quiet. Shuh, said Professor McGonagall. I met him, growled Hagrid. I must have been the last to see him before he killed all the people. It was me who rescued Harry from Lily and James's house after they were killed. Just got him out of the ruins. Poor little thing, with a great slash across his forehead. And his parents dead. And Sirius Black turns up on that flying motorbike he used to ride. Never occurred to me what he was doing there. I didn't know he'd been Lily and James's secret keeper. Though he'd just heard the news, whose attack and come to see what he could do. White and shaken, he was... And you know what I did? I comforted the murdering traitor. Hagrid roared. Hagrid, please, said Professor McGonagall. Keep your voice down. How was I to know he wasn't upset about Lily and James? It was you. Know who he cared about? And then he says, give Harry to me, Hagrid. I'm his godfather. Everyone at the table of Gryffindors froze as Yuki, Hermione, and Ron exchanged looks. I'll look after him, huh? But I'd had my orders from Dumbledore, and I told Black no. Dumbledore said Harry was to go to his aunt and uncle's. Black argued, but in the end he gave in, told me to take his motorbike to get Harry there. I wouldn't need it anymore, he says. I should have known there was something fishy going on then. He loved that motorbike. What was he giving it to me for? Why wouldn't he need it anymore? The fact was, it was too easy to trace. Dumbledore knew he'd been the Potter's secret keeper, and Grant had to go on a mission. Black knew he was going to have to run ferret that night. Knew it was a matter of hours before the Ministry was after him. Black told them where Davis was that night. But what if I'd given Harry to him, eh? I bet he'd pitch him off the bike halfway out to sea. His best friend's son. But when a wizard goes over to the dark side, there's nothing and no one that matters to him anymore. A long silence followed Hagrid's story. Then Madame Rosmerta said with some satisfaction, but he didn't manage to disappear, did he? The Ministry of Magic caught up with him the next day. Alas, if only we had, said Fudge bitterly. It was not we who found him. It was little Peter Pettigrew, another of the Potter's friends. Man by grief, no doubt, and knowing that Black had been the Potter's secret keeper, he went after Black himself. Pettigrew, that fat little boy who was always tagging around after them at Hogwarts, said Madame Rosmerta. Hero worshipped Davis, Black and Potter, said Professor McGonagall. Never quite in their league, talent-wise. I was often rather sharp with him. You can imagine how I regret that now. She sounded as though she had a sudden head cold. There now, Minerva, said Fudge kindly. Pettigrew died a hero's death. Eyewitnesses, muggles, of course, we wiped their memories later, told us how Pettigrew cornered Black. They say he was sobbing. Lily and James, Sirius. How could you? And then he went for his wand. Well, of course, Black was quicker. Blew Pettigrew to smithereens. Professor McGonagall blew her nose and said thickly, stupid boy, foolish boy. He was always hopeless at dueling. Should have left it to the Ministry. I tell ye, if I got to Black before little Pettigrew did, I would not have messed around with wands. I'd ripped him limb from limb, Hagrid growled. You don't know what you're talking about, Hagrid, said Fudge sharply. Nobody but trained hit wizards from the magical law enforcement squad would have stood a chance against Black once he was cornered. I was junior minister in the Department of Magical Catastrophes at the time, and I was one of the first on the scene after Black murdered all those people. I will never forget it. I still dream about it sometimes. A crater in the middle of the street, so deep it had cracked the sewer below. Bodies everywhere. Muggles screaming, and Black standing there laughing, with what was left of Pettigrew in front of him. A heap of blood-stained robes and a few a few fragments. Fudge's voice stopped abruptly. There was the sound of 5 noses being blown. Well, there you have it, Rosmerta, said Fudge thickly. Black was taken away by 20 members of the Magical Law Enforcement Patrol and sent right to Azkaban since we knew he did it. That part stuck out for Yuki for a second, the girl thought about it. And Pettigrew received the Order of Merlin, first class, which I think was some comfort to his poor mother. Black's been in Azkaban ever since. Madame Rosmerta let out a long sigh. Is it true he's mad, Minister? I wish I could say that he was, said Fudge slowly. I certainly believe his master's defeat unhinged him for a while. The murder of Pettigrew and all those muggles was the action of a cornered and desperate man. Cruel, pointless. Yet I met Black on my last inspection of Azkaban. You know, most of the prisoners were muttering to themselves in the dark. There's no sense in them. But I was shocked at how normal Black seemed. He spoke quite rationally to me. It was unnerving. You'd have thought he was merely bored. Asked if I'd finished with my newspaper. Cool as you please. Said he missed doing the crossword. Yes, I was astounded at how little effect the Dementors seemed to be having on him. And he was one of the most heavily guarded in the place, you know. Dementors outside his door, day and night. But what do you think he's broken out to do? Said Madame Rosmerta. Good gracious, Minister, he isn't trying to rejoin you-know-who, is he? I dare say that is his, eventual plan, said Fudge evasively. But we hope to catch Black long before that. I must say, you-know-who alone and friendless is one thing. But give him back his most devoted servant, and I shudder to think how quickly he'll rise again. There was a small chink of glass on the wood. Someone had set down their glass. You know, Cornelius, if you're dining with the headmaster, we'd better head back up to the castle, said Professor McGonagall. One by one, the pairs of feet in front of Harry took the weight of their owners once more. Hems of cloaks swung into sight, and Madame Rosmerta's glittering heels disappeared behind the bar. The door of the 3 broomsticks opened again. There was another flurry of snow, and the teachers disappeared. Harry, Yuki softly spoke. Yuki, Ron, and Hermione's faces appeared under the table. They were both staring at him, lost for words with tears forming in his eyes. Hermione looked at Yuki as she knew her best friend for in and out, and knew she was lying if she said she was okay. Harry didn't have an obvious idea of how he had got back into the Honeydew cellar, through the tunnel, and into the castle once more. All he knew was that the return trip seemed to take no time at all, and that he hardly noticed what he was doing because his head was still pounding with the conversation he had just heard. Why had nobody ever told him? Dumbledore, Hagrid, Mr. Weasley, Cornelius Fudge. Why hadn't anyone ever mentioned the fact that Harry's parents had died because their best friend had betrayed them? Ron and Hermione watched Harry nervously throughout dinner. Even Yuki, who didn't even know how to deal with this new information, was more worried about Harry than herself. All of them not daring to talk about what they'd overheard, because Percy was sitting close by them. When they went upstairs to the crowded common room, it was to find Fred and George had set off half a dozen dung bombs in a fit of end-of-term high spirits. All Yuki was thinking about is how Sirius felt about not getting a trail, and if that was far or not. Her father was an Auror, so she knew nothing good could happen. She got the letter from him when she was older. Hello, Yuki, Fred and George smirked, turning to the girl as she got out of her head and turned to the twins with a fake small smile. Harry, who didn't want Fred and George asking him whether he'd reached Hogsmeade or not, sneaked quietly up to the empty dormitory and headed straight for his bedside cabinet. What's wrong with him? The twins asked in unison as the 3 looked at each other, and Yuki excused herself and went up to the girls' dormitory. Harry pushed his books aside and quickly found what he was looking for, the leather-bound photo album Hagrid had given him 2 years ago, which was full of wizard pictures of his mother and father. He sat down on his bed, drew the hangings around him, and started turning the pages, searching until he stopped on a picture of his parents' wedding day. There was his father waving up at him, beaming, the untidy black hair Harry had inherited, standing up in all directions. There was his mother, alight with happiness, arm in arm with his dad. And there that must be him. Their best man Harry had never given him a thought before. If he hadn't known it was the same person, he would never have guessed it was Black in this old photograph. His face wasn't sunken and waxy, but handsome, full of laughter. Had he already been working for Voldemort when this picture had been taken? Was he already planning the deaths of the two people next to him? Did he realize he was facing 12 years in Azkaban? 12 years which would make him unrecognizable? But the Dementors don't affect him, Harry thought, staring into the handsome, laughing face. He doesn't have to hear my mum screaming if they get too close. Harry slammed the album shut, reached over and stuffed it back into his cabinet, took off his robes and glasses and got into bed, making sure the hangings were hiding him from view. Yuki took out the letter from her father and started to read it. Dear Yuki, if you are reading this, then a tragedy happened. I'm sorry. I risked my life. I'm sorry you don't have a father. I'm sorry for all of the pain I put you through. I miss you so much. You should be around 11. How is Hogwarts so far? I promise you will meet the best people. I know that I did. I meet the best people that I could ever meet in my life. Love you to the moon and back, your father. The girl bit down on her teeth, trying to not cry. She folded the paper up and put it on top of the poster bed. All she cared about is at least she had a mother. Yuki walked out of the dormitory. Yuki walked past the people in the common room and made her way to the boys' dormitory. Yuki walked over and knocked on the door as Ron opened it with a nod, knowing Yuki, and walked out, just leaving Yuki and Harry. Harry looked up, and she gave him a faint smile. He knew. He knew where they were, and he's the reason they are dead. Even your father. Harry spoke as Yuki nodded with a small smile, still not letting it affect her. She walked over and sat next to Harry, as the boy put his head on Yuki's shoulder and started to cry. She put her head up and cupped his cheek while he cried on her shoulder. I know. Harry, you look terrible. Hermione said Harry hadn't got to sleep until daybreak. He had awoken to find the dormitory deserted, dressed, and gone down the spiral staircase to a common room that was completely empty except for Ron, who was eating a peppermint toad and massaging his stomach, and Hermione, who had spread her homework over 3 tables. Yuki and Harry had fallen asleep next to each other last night after talking for hours. Where's everyone? Said Harry. They went home, the soft voice said as Yuki walked down from the girls' dormitory wearing an oversized t-shirt that Ginny let her borrow and sweat. Pants, not her normal style of clothing. It's nearly lunchtime. One of us was going to come and wake you. Harry slumped into a chair next to the fire. Snow was still falling outside the windows. Crookshanks was spread out in front of the fire like a large ginger rug. You really don't look well, you know, Hermione said, peering anxiously into his face. I'm fine, said Harry. Yuki knew he wasn't okay and wasn't going to push it. Harry, listen, said Hermione, exchanging a look with Ron, as Yuki curled up in the single chair. You must be really upset about what we heard yesterday. But the thing is, you mustn't go doing anything stupid. Like what? Said Harry. Like trying to go after Black, said Ron sharply. Harry could tell they had rehearsed this conversation while he had been asleep. He didn't say anything. You won't, will you, Harry? Asked Hermione. Because Black's not worth dying for, said Ron. Harry looked at them. They didn't seem to understand at all. Do you know what I see and hear every time a Dementor gets too near me? Ron and Hermione shook their heads, looking apprehensive. As Harry told Yuki last night, so the girl knew. I can't hear my mom screaming and pleading with Voldemort. And if you'd heard your mom screaming like that, just about to be killed, you wouldn't forget it in a hurry. And if you found out someone who was supposed to be a friend of hers betrayed her and sent Voldemort after her, there's nothing you can do, said Hermione, looking stricken. The Dementors will catch Black, and he'll go back to Azkaban and then serve him right. I mean, he didn't get a trail, Yuki stated. Everything went silent as the trio turned to her. I'm just saying, he might be innocent, might not. Everyone deserves to have their side of the story. Hermione shook her head as Harry looked away, not listening to Yuki for once in his life. Hermione, you heard what Fudge said. Black isn't affected by Azkaban like normal people are. It's not a punishment for him like it is for the others. So what are you saying? Said Ron, looking very tense. You wanted to kill Black or something? Don't be silly. Yuki said, looking over at Harry, serious this time and not being in the dreaming state that she always is. Again, Harry didn't answer. He didn't know what he wanted to do. All he knew was that the idea of doing nothing while Black was at liberty was almost more than he could stand. Harry Malfoy knows, he said abruptly. Remember what he said to me in Potions? If it was me, I'd hunt him down myself. I'd want revenge. You're going to take Malfoy's advice instead of ours, Yuki's, said Ron furiously. Listen, you know what Pettigrew's mother got back after Black had finished with him? Dad told me. The Order of Merlin, first class, and Pettigrew's finger in a box. That was the biggest bit of him they could find. Black's a madman, Harry, and he's dangerous. Maybe Dash, Yuki stated. He is. Yuki, he got your father killed. Harry snapped as Yuki got up and walked out of the common room, leaving them behind. Merlin, Harry, Dash, Hermione uttered chasing after Yuki. But the girl wasn't going to cry, sob, or anything. She was doing what any other Ravenclaw would do even if she was put in Gryffindor because of her father side going to talk to the one that she knew went to school with them. Remus Lupin. Yuki knocked on Lupin's door as no one answered. It seemed to be empty, almost abandoned. Sneaking around Dash, Snape's voice echoed as Yuki turned to the man putting her gift to Remus for Christmas in her pocket. That isn't that bright of you. Looking for your loony friend, just as loony as you, Dash. Merry Christmas, Professor Dash, Yuki carelessly said, looking at Snape before walking away from the man with medium black hair. She walked around the castle. Merry Christmas, Yuki, Luna brightly said, looking at her as Yuki turned to her cousin. You seem to be going on a walk. Mind if I join? I have to look for my shoes, she stated, holding papers. Yuki nodded. Don't mind at all. Yuki and Luna started to walk together as Luna hung up pictures to find her missing things. Narbles have been mad now yet? Yuki asked, turning to her. Luna nodded. I'm afraid so. Father mailed me saying he lost his notebook. Luna explained as she looked over at Yuki once more. Why are you on a walk? Seems you have your shoes, Dash. I'm just looking for Professor Lupin. That's all. He's a wonderful professor. Might be one of the best so far, Dash, said Luna. Yuki completely agreed, other than Lockhart, who she didn't have a problem with, but wasn't learning another. It was like she was actually learning with Lupin around, but knowing the position might be cursed, he wasn't going to last long. Well, I should be getting to breakfast. Heard they are having pudding, Dash, Luna stated before skipping away. Yuki loved her family, no matter how loony. Odd it was they all cared for one another and didn't let anyone drag each other down. Excuse me, Professor Dash, Yuki called, going over to McGonagall, who was on her way to the Gryffindor Tower. Yes, dear Dash. McGonagall stopped, looking at Yuki, putting her full attention on the girl. Mind I ask where Professor Lupin is? I have something for him, Dash. Dear, he is busy right now, but I can assure you I'll tell him once he is out of the hospital wing, Dash. She nodded as McGonagall kept on walking away. Yuki continued to walk towards the hospital wing to talk to Remus, mostly to make sure he was okay. The hospital wing door open. Walked in was Yuki, who looked around. There was a divider in the way of one of the beds. Miss Sterling, what can I do for you, Dash? Madame Pomfrey asked, walking over to her. Yuki turned to the lady. Mind if I talk to Professor Lupin? It's about the next class. Reckon I should tell him. I wouldn't be making a dash. Yuki lied to get to the man, said to her. Madame Pomfrey, unsure, raised an eyebrow. A fake cough came from behind the divider. I guess, make it quick. Yuki nodded and walked over to the dividers as Pomfrey walked out of the hospital wing. Professor, Merry Christmas, Yuki. Lupin greeted her as she handed him a small box for Christmas. You didn't have to, you know, Dash. Yuki shook her head. Hope you're feeling all right. I know last night must have been hard. Anyways, I picked that up from Hogsmeade. Thought you would need a Dash. Lupin opened up the package, and it was multiple chocolate frogs and chocolates. Why, thank you, Yuki, Dash. It's honestly nothing. You're a brilliant teacher and deserve something other than Snape's insults, Dash, Yuki spoke. Remus looked at the girl, seeing the same redhead from almost 14 years ago, who was always there for him. You know you're not a monster, Professor. I know that's what you're thinking. You were a kid. Thank you, honestly, Remus said with a small nod. I know you want to know about your father, Dash. Actually, no. Yuki thought about it. Professor, I know you went to school with Sirius Black. Did you happen to be friends? Remus nodded, looking at Yuki. Yes, I knew him, he said shortly. Or I thought I did. I should really be getting rest now. Thank you really for everything, Dash. Yuki nodded as she walked out of the hospital wing, but turned around. Merry Christmas, Professor Dash, Yuki stated before walking off. Yuki was sitting in the common room. Oh, Yuki, you look lovely while you read, Dash, Fred flirted as he sat next to the girl, shocked from the snow that was outside. Yuki looked up from her creature book and turned to Fred, who smirked. George jumped over and sat on the other side. George, are you encouraging this? She asked him softly. He nodded. Yes, I am. Until Haraldson asks you out. Yuki looked down at the book once more as she quickly heated up. Not blushed, since everyone is a different skin tone. Fred's going to keep on trying, and I'm supporting him. George and Fred high-fived each other as Yuki shook her in, head looking back down at the book of the creatures. Fred hummed in response. Honestly, what was Hermione thinking? Said Ron as he and Harry stormed into the common room. Fred pulled Yuki close to him as she shook her head, not caring, and continued to read. What are you two on about? George asked, looking at the two boys as Yuki looked up from her book and turned to the two. Harry and Yuki made quick eye contact as Yuki was the one to look away awkwardly. Harry got a firebolt for Christmas, and Hermione told McGonagall. Do you know who it was from? Fred asked. The two shook their heads. Hermione was just looking out for Harry. It could be from Sirius Black. Yuki explained, looking up at the two as Ron shook his head, and so did Harry. Honestly, Ron, you seem more upset than Harry. Harry got out of the trance he was in and turned to Ron. She had no right to do that. That's all I'm saying. Yuki shook her head, standing up. I should go and check in on Hagrid. Yuki thought to herself. I'm going to Hagrid's to feed the creatures and Fong. Yuki stood up, shutting her book and putting it on the coffee table. I'll come. Harry announced before Fred could say anything. You're not allowed to leave the castle. Plus, I need a walk alone, Yuki stated, turning to Fred as he put his hands up in the air, and Yuki skipped out of the common room. Ron turned to all of his friends. She's gone mad. Madder than usual, Ron said once Yuki left the room. Harry looked away from the door and turned to Ron. Why do you say that? Now she is always disappearing, and she is always with Professor Lupin. Harry looked at Ron. Now did you hear the thing she said about Black? That you deserve to hear, his side. Fred and George both stated. Never mind. She isn't mad, she's different, and that's why I like her. She doesn't care what people say, especially Malfoy. Everyone turned to Harry as Fred and George both smirked. She is always with him, probably wants to know more about her father. He was friends with him. And when did Yuki not want to hear the whole story, and not just one side of it? Harry defended. Butterflies flutter over the great green lawn. The giant squid breaks through the last glaze of ice on the Black Lake. The whomping willow shakes the water from its branches. The dying sun streams through high windows, painting Harry's face a fierce amber red as he stands opposite Lupin. Ancient charts drape the walls while gleaming spheres of spun glass orbit one another. Silently, Lupin paces before a large trunk. You're sure about this, Harry? This is very advanced magic. Well beyond ordinary wizarding level. If Black can fight the Dementors, I need to know how to. Lupin studies Harry as if conflicted, then decides. Very well. The spell I'm going to teach you is called the Patronus charm. Ever hear of it? Harry shakes his head. A Patronus is a kind of positive force. For the wizard who can conjure one, the Patronus works something like a shield. The Dementor feeds on it instead of him. Just then, the trunk rattles violently. As Harry's eyes wander, as he thinks about Yuki and Fred, even knowing they aren't dating or anything. Lupin snaps his fingers, brings his attention back. But in order for it to work, you must think of a memory. And not just any. This memory needs to be a very happy one, and powerful. Harry thinks a bit, then nods. Got something? Good. Let it fill you up. Lose yourself in it. Then speak the incantation, Expecto Patronum. Without your wand. Expecto Patronum. Right then, shall we? Harry nods, raises his wand. Lupin, watching closely, reaches over, grips the lid of the trunk. Concentrate, Harry. Concentrate. As Lupin flings open the case, Harry opens. In the sun's blood light, the Dementor looks particularly horrific. Expecto Patronum. The torches on the wall flicker as a chill breeze fills the chamber. A scream echo distantly. Harry's hand trembles. His eyes begin to roll up. Expecto. Here. Crack. The Dementor mutates into a silvery white orb. Ridiculous. Lupin flicks his wand, sends the orb back into the packing case. Harry stands blinking. Dazed. Lupin fishes chocolate from his pocket, presses it into Harry's trembling hand. Quickly, Harry studies the frog, takes a bite, begins to recover. That's one nasty Dementor. Boggart, Harry. The real thing would be much, much worse. Just out of interest, what were you thinking of? What memory did you choose? On the Hogwarts Express, coming here? Why is that dash? Because I met Yuki. Ron and Hermione dash, Harry stated. Lupin shook his head. Even though it seems it, that's not good enough, Harry. Not nearly. Harry glances toward the window at the bloody sun. There's another. It's not happy exactly. I mean, it's the happiest I've ever felt. But it's complicated. Is it strong? Harry looks up into Lupin's eyes. Emotional. Nods. Then let's try it. Harry takes a breath, tosses the frog aside, poises himself. Think, Harry, think. Just do it. Lupin blinks at Harry's quiet fierceness. Opens the packing case. Instantly, the Dementor appears again. A chill fills the air. The hair skates off Harry's scar. He sets his jaw. Expecto Patronum. Harry's hand trembles. His whole body trembles. But he holds his ground when a huge silver shadow bursts from the end of his wand, hovering between him and the Dementor. The Dementor falters Harry's legs like water. Ridiculous. Crack. The Dementor vanishes. Harry's arm drops. Slack. Lupin eyes Harry with a kind of awe, his voice barely a whisper. Well done. I think I've had enough. For today. Lupin nods. Watches Harry moves to the door. So you know, Harry, you'd have given your father a run for his money. And believe me, that's saying something. Harry ponders this, then speaks deep inside himself. I was thinking of him and Mom, seeing their faces. They're just talking to me. Just talking. That was the memory I chose. I don't even know if it's real. Harry grips the door, pushes past. But it's the best I have. A hulking, haunted Goliath against the sky. A cautious breeze rises. Leaves scud across the gravel. A church. Empty. Silent. A window pane rattles up high. The corridor thatched in shadow. A shadow engulfs Sir Cadogan, dozing against the tree. The sneakoscope, whirling madly, skitters across the bedside cabinet and taps against a water glass, sending shafts of red light pinwheeling over the photo of Harry's parents. Yeah. Harry bolts, see a silhouette etched on the window, a man clutching a knife. All the boys are up now and screaming amid the chaos. Harry quickly grabbed his wand. Everybody out. The others flee. Harry faces the hulking shadow, wand poised. Show yourself. Crash. The water glass shatters on the floor, and Scabbers darts past Harry's bare feet, chased by Crookshanks. Seizing the moment, the silhouette grasps the curtains and swings through the open window, plunging into the night. Harry rushes to the window, looks down. The silhouette leaps from ledge to ledge with an animal's grace, then vanishes. Harry sweeps Ron's curtains aside. His bed is empty. Ron! Ron! Harry's eyes flash toward the window when Ron pokes his head out from under the bed. Is he gone? The entire Gryffindor house, in pajamas, stand before McGonagall, who wears a tartan robe and an expression of singular irritation. Yuki stood next to Hermione, wearing an oversized black hoodie that Harry let her borrow. That's preposterous, Weasley. How could Sirius Black possibly have got through the portrait hole? I don't know how he got in. I was a bit busy dodging his knife. Just then, a curiously content Crookshanks wins his way through Ron's legs. And this bloody cat ate my rat, shouted Ron, pointing at the cat that Hermione was holding, causing Hermione to gasp. That's a lie. It is not, and you bloody well know it. Silence. McGonagall turns then, and everyone follows her eye to Sir Cadogan, who, sensing the attention, perks up instantly. Sir Cadogan, is it possible that you let a mysterious man enter Gryffindor Tower tonight? Certainly, good lady. He had the password. Had the whole week's, in fact, on a little piece of paper. Sir Cadogan dramatically said, as everyone looked around the room, which abysmally foolish person wrote down the passwords and then proceeded to lose them. Every eye shifts once more. Neville. McGonagall sighs. Is it always going to be you, Longbottom? I'm afraid so, ma'am. Professor McGonagall turned to everyone. While we know Sirius Black is gone tonight, I think you can safely assume he will, at some future time, attempt to return. Let me be clear. You are not to move about the castle alone, and you are not to write down the password. Understood? A collective nod of the head. McGonagall gives the ties of her robe a sharp tug, collects herself, and exits. Very well then, go to bed. As the students drift off, Ron casts a last angry glance toward Hermione, who now holds Crookshanks in her arms. I could have killed him. Hermione turns, sees Harry staring out the window. He was right there, close enough to touch. I could have killed him. Harry spoke sitting on the chair. Yuki looked at the boy. Harry, murder will send you to Azkaban. She spoke. I'll miss you way too much if you went to Azkaban. She placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. The quartet makes its way down the slope. Yuki not having shoes on because of Nargles. I find it astonishing that someone who prides herself on being so logical can be in such denial, said Ron, harshly looking around. Harry, Yuki, will you explain to your friend Ronald that he has absolutely no proof whatsoever that my sweet, unassuming cat ate his shabby, decidedly decrepit rat? Hermione asked as they continued to walk. Harry was there. I'll tell you how it was. Go on, Harry, tell her. Harry shook her head as Yuki turned to him. No, I won't. Know why? Because I don't care about your stupid rat. I don't care about your stupid cat. I've got few other things on my mind right now. Harry spoke as everyone stopped walking. Really? Wasn't you had to roll under the bed last night to avoid getting cut to ribbons? A person could die being your friend, Harry. Ron stops, wishes he could take it back. They all wish he could. Avoiding each other's eyes, they turn, continue on. Lovely day dash. Yuki defused the tension as they continued to walk. Hagrid, wearing a gigantic, hairy brown suit and perhaps the world's ugliest yellow and orange tie, stands knee-deep in the shallows of the Black Lake, skimming rocks as big as flagstones across the water's shiny gloss. As he turns, the trio catches a brief sight of his eyes, red with tears. Then he looks away. How'd it go, Hagrid? Buckbeak like London. That's wonderful. But what about the meeting? Yuki asked, looking at the man in the lake. Oh, that. Well, I got up and said my bit. You know how Buckbeak was a good hippogriff, and as long as you had treated him with respect, he'd treat you the same. Then Lucius Malfoy got up and said his bit. You know how Buckbeak was a deadly, dangerous beast that no teacher in their right mind would expose their students to. And Hagrid slings another rock into water. You mustn't blame yourself, Hagrid. Draco. It's him the committee should punish. It's him they should send off to the forest, not Buckbeak. Yuki hit Ron's arm. Buckbeak's not going back to the forest. Hermione and Yuki exchanged looks and turned back to Hagrid. Where's he going, Hagrid? He asked fair the worse, yes, see, Lucius Malfoy did. And the committee granted it. Buckbeak's been sentenced to her death. Yuki's heart dropped at the idea of Buckbeak being sentenced to death. Later that night, dark, ominous, Dementors drift in the distance. Restless, silent, a room of shadows. While those around him slumber, Harry lies, awake, unable to sleep. Finally, he turns to his cupboard, takes the Marauder's map. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. The crooked corridors and serpentine passageways of Hogwarts radiate across the parchment. Then a tiny that catches Harry's eye. He frowns. It reads, Peter Pettigrew. Harry moves down a dark corridor, map in hand, wand aglow. In the paintings he passes, the subject snores. Harry Potter and Peter Pettigrew draw closer and closer. Harry squints toward the end of the corridor. Down at the map, Pettigrew moves quickly down the adjoining corridor. 20 yards away. 10. Only seconds away. Wand trembling in his hand. Harry glances from the map to the dark corridor ahead again and again. When Harry bumped into someone, "Ah, dash," Yuki softly said as the two looked at each other. Yuki. No, it's Ron Dash, Yuki wittingly stated. What are you doing? The both of them asked as Yuki grinned and shook her head. I just came from the library. We have a test, Yuki explained. Plus, I was looking for my shoes. They have to be somewhere you... Well, remember when McGonagall and the minister said that Pettigrew was killed by Black? Harry asked the girl as she hummed and nodded. He's on the map. Look, Dash. Yuki walked over and stood next to Harry looking at the Marauder's map. Pettigrew was walking towards the 2 dots Yuki Sterling and Harry Potter. Suddenly the 3 dots are about to collide. The 3 of them looked up and turned the corner together as Yuki looked around. She furrows her eyebrows and looked back down at the map. Something is off, Yuki stated, looking at the name walk around. A noise happened as Harry turned around holding his wand against the wall. Watch it there, boy. Harry and Yuki jump as the old man painting was glaring at the two of them. The two looked down at the map as Pettigrew continued to walk away. They follow and footsteps were echoing in the corridors. Harry grabbed the map as he looked at the name. Severus Snape moving towards them. Mischief managed, Harry stashes the map, extinguishes his wand, grabbing Yuki's hand after she heard footsteps from the distance and got out of the trance that she was in, and turned into the harsh glare of Snape's wand. Potter, Sterling, what are you doing wandering the corridors at night? I was sleepwalking, Harry answered as Yuki shook her head. Late nights studying, Yuki truthfully stated. A sneer curdles the corners of Snape's lips. How extraordinarily like your father you are, Potter. He, too, was exceedingly arrogant, strutting about the castle. My dad didn't strut. Nor do I. Yuki turned to Harry, unsure if that was a true statement, and turned back to Snape. Now, if you don't mind, I'd appreciate you lowering your wand. Snape eyes Harry coldly. Containing himself, lowers his wand. Turn out your pockets. Both of you. Harry doesn't move, and neither does Yuki, eyes still boring into Snape. Turn out your pockets. Finally, Harry obliges. Seeing the map, Snape's eyes glitter. Sterling, Sir, I don't have pockets, and if I did, why would you want a 13-year-old girl to turn out her pockets seeing the conditions that we have? Said Yuki. Snape glared at the girl as Harry took the map out of his pocket. And this? What might it be? Spare bit of parchment. Really? Reveal your secret. To Harry's horror, words begin to appear. Snape studies him, a sadistic half-smile on his lips. Turns the map his way. Read it. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs offer their compliments to Professor Snape, and Harry started to read as Yuki looked over his shoulder and chuckled a little, biting back a grin. Go on, and request that he keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. Yuki continued, looking up innocently. Why, you insolent little Professor? Snape turns, sees Lupin standing in the shadows. Yuki grinned a little, seeing the man okay from the last time she saw him. Well, Lupin, out for a little walk in the moonlight, are we? The grin quickly went down as she turned to Snape. Harry? Yuki, you all right? The 2 third years nodded, looking at the man. That remains to be seen. I've just now confiscated a rather curious artifact from Mr. Potter and Ms. Sterling. Take a look, Lupin. This is supposed to be your area of expertise. Lupin takes the parchment, which now displays a rather unflattering caricature of Snape and a pair of potions. Clearly, it's full of dark magic. I seriously doubt that, Severus. It looks to me as if it merely insults anyone who tries to read it. I suspect it's a Zonko product. Nevertheless, I shall pursue any hidden qualities it may possess. As you say, it's my area of expertise. Come, Harry and Yuki. Yuki and Harry walks aside a fuming Lupin, who grips the map fiercely. I don't know how this map came to be in your possession, Harry, but I'm astounded that you didn't turn it in. Did you ever stop to think that this, in the hands of Sirius Black, is a map to you? Harry walks silently, and Yuki looked around. Lupin can barely contain his anger. Both of your father didn't set much store by rules either, but he and your mother did give their lives to save yours, gambling their sacrifice by walking about the castle unprotected with a killer on the loose. Strikes me as a poor way to repay them. I won't cover up for you again, Harry. Lupin enters his office, tosses the map on his desk, and begins to sort through some papers. Harry lingers briefly in the doorway, with Yuki looking at the waxing moon that glimmers beyond the window. Professor, just so you know, I don't think the map always works. Earlier, it showed someone in the castle, someone I know to be dead. And who was that, Harry? He asked, half listening. Peter Pettigrew. Yuki spoke up, looking at the man. Lupin hesitates ever so slightly, then returns to his papers. Very well. I'd like you to return to your dormitories now. Oh, and Yuki? Don't take any detours. She nodded, looking at him. As Harry and Yuki looks back, Lupin taps the map. If you do, I'll know. The two walked out of his office. Great. The map is gone, Dash. I think it's for the better. I don't know about that map, Harry. It's saying someone who is dead is alive, unless Pettigrew is a ghost. Hear them. Something is up. Yuki explained. Harry turned to her and nodded. You know, I can help you look for your belongings, Dash. That caused the girl to shake her head. Luna's mom always said to us, things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end. If not always in the way we expect, she explained. She was wonderful, Dash. Relax. Let your mind go. The students gaze into Crystal Ball, faces reflecting the mist within, so that their very skin seems to be made of smoke. A day has passed since Yuki saw Pettigrew's dot on the map. Conspicuously, Harry, Ron, and Hermione sit apart. Yuki sat with Lavender Brown, someone who she was friends with, and Neville. Crystal gazing requires that you clear the inner eye. Only then will you see. Oh my, what do we have here? Yuki paid attention, writing things down in her book as Trelawney talked. As Trelawney eyes Harry's crystal, Hermione rolls her eyes. Here we go, again. It's the Grim. It's the Grim. Hermione shouted. Trelawney frowned her eyebrows. My dear, from the moment you first arrived in my class, I sensed that you did not possess the proper spirit for the noble art of divination. You may be young in years, but the heart that beats beneath your bosom is as shriveled as an old maid's. Your soul as dry as the pages of the books to which you so desperately cleave. Stung, Hermione starts to reply, but remarkably seems incapable of a single word. Rising gracelessly, she exits, knocking her crystal ball to the floor. Yuki watches curiously as the ball rolls slowly out the doorway. In late spring, one of our number will leave us forever. You knew, Professor. You saw, Lavender announced. On these occasions, I take no joy in my gift, Miss Brown. Yuki walked down the steps with Lavender, Parvati. Wonderful subject. I don't understand what Hermione has against her, Dash, Lavender explained. I'm going to the library to study, Yuki announced before walking down the steps towards the library, walking past Harry and Ron, who were in a conversation. She's gone mental, Hermione has. I mean, not that she wasn't always mental, but now it's out in the open for everyone to see. Ron stops, glances at Harry, then moves off. Harry watches him go, along with the others, then spies Hermione's crystal ball lying on the landing. Harry sets Hermione's crystal back on its stand, starts to go, when the smoke within the crystal suddenly darkens. Leaning close, Harry watches the shape that appears. It is unmistakable, Sirius Black. Just then, a shadow crawls the glossy surface of the crystal, and a hand snatches Harry's shoulder. He wheels, finds Professor Trelawney. He will return tonight. Harry stiffens. Trelawney's voice is eerily hollow. Sorry. Tonight, when the clock strikes 12, the servant shall break free. He and his master shall be reunited. It cannot be prevented. Trelawney smiles savagely, then her head falls forward. When it rises, she blinks, eyes the hand that lies upon Harry's shoulder. Her hand. Yuki stood at the door, trying to figure out what she said. So sorry, dear boy. Did you say something? Her voice is normal once more. Harry shakes his head. No, nothing. Miss Sterling, how can I help? I'm turning in the essay, due next week, Dash, Yuki stated, leaving the paper down on her desk before walking out with Harry. Why, heard that right? Harry panicked as Yuki nodded. Tonight, when the clock strikes 12, the servant shall break free. He and his master shall be reunited. It cannot be prevented. What could that mean? Yuki uttered, trying to figure it out. It's almost like a riddle. She uttered to herself this time. Swook, swook. A crow glides to the flock, circling the feet of a pot-bellied man sitting in the courtyard as he sharpened an axe. Rushing past the executioner Harry, Ron, and Hermione towards Hagrid's hut. It's awful what they're going to do with Buckbeak, Yuki softly and quietly spoke, appearing behind all of them. When did you get here? Ron asked, confused. She shook her head, putting the time turner in Hermione's hand since she was coming from the library. I was here the whole time. Harry looked forward. Anyway, it just got worse. They look and see Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle lurks within a grouping of monolithic menhirs, binoculars in hand, spying on Hagrid, who stands in the pumpkin patch, tossing dead ferrets to Buckbeak. Hagrid wipes his eyes. Lopez into the hut. You foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach. Hermione rushed forward, pointing her wand at Malfoy's neck. Malfoy stumbles back against a tree, cross-eyed with fear as Hermione jabs the tip of her wand under his nose. When Hermione, no. She turns, surprised Ron's spoken to her. He looks away. He's not worth it. Hermione nods, then punched him quick as lightning. Lands a looping right to Malfoy's jaw, putting him flat on his back. Stunned, he leaps to his feet and runs, Crabbe and Goyle huffing and puffing behind. That felt good. Brilliant, Ron spoke. The four of them makes their way down the slope and past Buckbeak, chewing on a ferret with idle satisfaction. Hagrid stands by the window watching Buckbeak. Harry and Ron sit. Hermione and Yuki made tea. Look at him. Loves the smell of the trees when the wind blows. I say we set him free. Harry spoke as the four of them nodded. They'd know I did it, and they would only get Dumbledore in trouble. Gonna come down, you know. Says he wants her to be with me when it happens. Great man, Dumbledore. We'll stay with you too, Hagrid, Hermione mentioned. Yeah, we'll not. Think I want you seeing a thing like this? No. Yell, drink your tea and be off. But before you do, I want to see you and Ron shake hands, Harry. Ron and Harry exchange a glance, then look to Hagrid. Thin Eye haven seen how it's been between you two? Go on now. Reluctantly, Harry and Ron extend their hands. Shake. Good. Now then, Ron, I want to see you give Hermione a hug. What? Hermione and Ron both exclaimed. Yuki turned to Hermione as she shook her head. Go on. You've been at it all year, and I'm sick of it. Then Yuki and Harry, then Ron. Acutely uncomfortable, Hermione and Ron step forward and perform perhaps the most awkward hug Hogwarts has ever seen. Crikey, this just abu, the most pathetic hug I e'er seen. But ye did it, and this one matters. There's just one other thing. I'm not kissing Fong if that's what you're thinking. Hearing his name, Fong, Hagrid's giant boarhound, thumps his tail happily on the floor. Hagrid turned to Yuki and Harry. The two of them looked at Hagrid as the man motioned out. Yuki walked over as Harry wrapped his arms around her, and Yuki wrapped her arms around his neck. Hagrid cleared his throat as the two were hugging longer than Ron and Hermione. Ron and Yuki shook hands, quickly turning to Hagrid, who motioned for them to hug. The two quickly hugged and turned to Hagrid. The man walked over, takes the lid from a flower tin. A tiny head, ears flecked with powder, emerges. Scabbers, you're alive. You should keep a closer eye on your pets, Ron. I think you owe someone an apology, right? Next time I see Crookshanks, I'll let him know. I meant me. Yuki shook her head and walked over to Harry, ready for the two to start arguing once more. Crikey. Here we go again. Smash. A glass jar on the shelf shatters, causing everyone to jump and turn to it. What was that? Yuki asked as Hermione scoops up a jagged star-shaped stone. A second stone bounces off the back of Harry's head. Ow! Harry turns, looks out the window as Yuki walked over and grabbed the same rock that Hermione was holding. Hagrid! Everyone turns. Looks. Dumbledore and Fudge approach. Behind them, in a fluttering shroud of crows, the executioner follows, axe at his side. Hagrid begins to panic. You gotta go. It's almost dark. Anyone sees you outside the castle, it'll be trouble. Big trouble. Especially you, Harry. Bang, bang, bang. The door shakes. Hagrid stiffens in fear. Harry reaches up, puts his finger to Hagrid's trembling lips, speaks softly to the others. Small? Harry grabbed Yuki's hand as she turned back to Hagrid. It's going to be okay, Dash. She calmed him down as he nodded, and Harry leads the two out, following Hermione and Ron. As the four exits through the back door, Fudge, Dumbledore, and the executioner enter through the front. A veil of crows flutters onto the roof. More drop into the patch, begin to slowly circle Buckbeak. Harry and the others duck behind the pumpkins. Watch Hagrid solemnly greet the others. Fudge appears at the window, picks his nose. Just then a shill is heard. Yuki turns. The trees behind Yuki started to dance around funny. What? Harry asked, caught her attention. Nothing. The four of them slipped silently into a stand of trees. Beyond them, Hagrid's hut glimmers desolately in the dying sun. High in the clock tower, A bell begins to toll. Ding, ding, ding. The four of them stops, fighting their tears. A quartet of bleak shadows files from the hut. One of the shadows, Dumbledore, raises his hand and points, directing the attention of the others away from Buckbeak. Dumbledore speaks briefly, unintelligible from this distance. Then the crows shriek excitedly, and the executioner separates from the others, disappears behind a low stand of trees. Ding. Everything goes still. The wind loses its voice. Ding. Sunlight kicks off the axe as it rises over the trees. Ding. The axe hangs seemingly forever, etched against the sky, then drops from sight. A sickening chop fouls the breeze, and Ron and Harry stare toward the trees in numb disbelief. Yuki, face turned away, trembles as she puts her head in Harry's shoulder. The boy stiffens but gets why Yuki is acting more than the rest. She is in love with creatures, so no bloody hell she would be hurt. Ding! The sun sets, dropping behind the mountains in the distance. Hermione turns, sees a frenzied spray of crows stain the bloody sky, their primal shirking rising like a curse. Slowly, Hermione's hand falls onto Ron's shoulder as Harry wrapped an arm around Yuki's waist, comforting the girl. Blood runs down Ron's finger. He stares at his hand, at the blood running down his finger. He bit me? His eyes shift, see Scabbers streaking away. Ron, no. As Ron pelts after Scabbers, Yuki, Harry, and Hermione give chase. Ron reaches the summit, disappears over the top. The three follow quickly behind, but as Yuki, Harry, and Hermione reach the top of the ridge. Stop! Yuki, Harry. You do realize what tree this is? Ron nabs Scabbers, cradles him in his bloody palm. Whomping Willow. Yuki uttered at the same time. Ron said, now behave yourself. Ron is kneeling under the Whomping Willow. That's not good. Ron, run! Harry shouted. Ron spins, looks toward Harry. Harry, run! Yuki's eyes shift. Bounding toward him in the gathering gloom is an enormous, pale-eyed, jet-black dog. Harry shields Yuki quickly when the dog leaps clear over the three of them. Aya! The dog's teeth flash and close on Ron's foot, dragging him toward the trunk like a rag doll. Instantly, Yuki dashes forward and grabs Ron's hands, but he and Ron just keep scudding along the ground. I've got you, Hermione said as she pitches herself onto Harry's feet, and the three of them go scudding along. Harry! Harry raises his chin. The dog vanishes into the gasp at the base of the tree, begins to pull Ron through. Hold on, Ron, Harry said, holding onto the boy's hand. But it's no use. The dog is too powerful. Harry glances around desperately, then finds himself looking directly into Ron's eyes. He can read his mind. No, Ron. One by one, Ron releases his fingers from Harry's forearm, sacrificing himself. No! But Ron closes his eyes, releases his hands full, and disappears. As his voice echoes deep into the earth, Yuki, Harry, and Hermione rise, peer into the hole. Whomp! The Whomping Willow sweeps first Yuki, then Hermione, and then Harry into the air and drops them on their backsides. Audash! Yuki groaned once she hit the floor, swaying beautifully against the dusky sky, swishing softly. As one, they rise, run back toward the gap in the tree. A branch swoops down. Yuki and Hermione duck. Harry doesn't. He is flung one way, his glasses the other. Yuki hops over another branch, look briefly pleased with herself, as Hermione finds herself swept high in the air by a second branch. Yuki looked up and furrowed her eyebrows, trying to come up with something logical and not stupid. The trunk of the tree wasn't that far. A tree branch grabbed Yuki quickly as she was spinning in the air along with Hermione. Harry searching the ground for his glasses. Harry squints up, sees a pile-driving fist of a branch screaming straight down for his head. He rolls away just as the branch pulverizes the ground. Yuki whips around, still clinging for dear life, and Harry raises. He's promptly knocked to the ground again. Hermione goes crashing through the high branches. Harry spies on his glasses and grabs them. Rising, he fits them to his face, and he can see Hermione and Yuki flying madly. Both of the girls screamed. Yuki reached out with her idea and grabbed Harry's shirt and riding the branch in tandem, the two boomerang back, hurtling toward the trunk of the tree, through the gap, and into the darkness below. Harry hits the ground hard. Yuki falls on top of him. "Thanks," Yuki uttered. "Don't mention it." Hermione falls on top of the two of them as the three falls back to the ground. "Sorry, no problem," the two said as they all stood up, and Harry grabbed his wand, pointing it around. Lumos! As the tip of Harry's wand glows, reveals a long, snaking tunnel. "Where do you suppose this goes?" Hermione asked, looking around, as Yuki looked around as well. "I have a hunch. I just hope I'm wrong." Yuki, Harry, and Hermione make their way through the primitive passageway, ducking the roots that dangle overhead. Then, abruptly, the tunnel ends. Confused, Harry and Hermione glance about. Then, as one peer up, a small opening. Harry reaches up, hoists himself through. Harry pulls Yuki and Hermione up, looks around. Paper peels from the walls. Stains suspiciously similar to dried blood blot the floorboards. Shattered furniture lies strewn everywhere. "We're in the Shrieking Shack, aren't we?" "Yep," Yuki whispered to Hermione. Harry doesn't answer, though, staring at the dog prints in the dust on the floor. The ceiling creaks. They dash to the stairs and come out. Look down. A wide, shiny stripe cuts through the dust-laden floor, as if something has been dragged to the end of the hallway, where a light seeps from a door. Knocks. His wand light dies. Slowly, they step to the door, exchange a look. She nods, wand ready, and Harry kicks the door aside. Ron sits upon a sagging bed, clutching his bloody foot. "Ron," Yuki announced as they all rushed over to the boy. "Ron, you're okay?" Hermione asked in a panic. "The dog. Where's the—" "It's a trap, Harry. He's the dog. He's an animagus." Harry, Yuki, and Hermione look down, follows the paw prints on the floor to a pair of filthy human feet. Yuki looks up slowly at the man standing in the shadows. Filthy, matted hair hangs to his shoulders, his skin like a corpse. Sirius Black studies Harry's face keenly. Harry draws his wand. "If you want to kill Harry, you'll have to kill us too," Ron shouted, standing up on his bad foot and stepping in front of Harry with his arms out. "No, only one will die tonight. Did you hear me? Get back!" Ron continued to shout. "Ron, you should sit dash," Yuki uttered, looking down at his food. "She's right," Dash Black spoke, now looking at Ron and turning away from Harry. "Then it'll be you." Harry rushed forward. He tackled Black to the floor, pointing his wand at his neck. "Harry Dash," Yuki spoke, not shouting like always. Just then, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Black wheels toward the door, edgy. Harry eyes Black, one hand shaking violently. As Black turns back, he stops, regards Harry cautiously. "Going to kill me, Harry?" "Yes." "No, Yuki answered brightly." Harry raises his wand. The door crashes open as Lupin stood in the doorway. "Professor Lupin." Lupin ignores them, eyeing Black intensely. "Looking a bit ragged. Aren't we serious?" Finally, the skin reflects the madness within. "You'd know all about the madness within, wouldn't you, Remus?" The two regards each other, the moment taut with tension. Then Lupin steps forward and embraces Black. "No, I trusted you. I covered up for you. And all this time you've been his friend," Hermione shouted, pointing. "Mione Dash," Yuki spoke, trying to calm her, "found down. He's a werewolf. That's why he's been missing classes." Harry and Ron stared, dumbfounded, at Lupin as Yuki shook her head. Black howls, then, bitterly amused. Lupin eyes him, then turns back. "How long have you known?" "Since Professor Snape set the essay. You and Yuki really are the brightest witches of your age I've ever met. Yes, you glow like the sun. And you howl at the moon. Enough talk." He dies. "Now, if you won't do it with me, Remus, I'll do it alone." "Wait," Sirius Lupin tried to call. "I did my waiting. 12 years of it. In Azkaban. Trust me, you wouldn't have lasted a week." Lupin eyes Black, then nods. "All right then, as you wish." "No." Harry raises his wand when Lupin wheels and, with a flick of his own, disarms him. Furious, Harry's eyes Black murderously. Yuki put her hand in Harry's, knowing the boy as he calmed down a little bit at her touch. He shook his head. "You betrayed my parents and Yuki's dad. You sold them to Voldemort." It's a lie. I never would have betrayed James and Lily. Or Davis. Harry, you got to listen. Did he listen? When my mother was dying, did he hear her screaming? No, I wasn't there, and I'll regret it the rest of my life. Same with Davis. Yuki's eyes flashed to Black's, glittering with pain. Someone else betrayed your parents, Harry. And Yuki, your father, someone in this room right now. Someone who, until quite recently, I believed to be dead. He's as good as dead. What are you talking about? There's nobody here. Oh, yes, there is. Black turns then to Ron and croons in a cruel sing-song. Come out, Peter, come out and play. Ron draws back from Black's demented gaze. You're mad. Yuki's eyes shift from Ron's face to his hands, where Scabbers twists violently. As a curious expression befalls Yuki, Harry, Lupin, and Black, as one, raise their wands when. Expelliarmus. The wands fly from their hands. The others turn, find Snape standing in the doorway, smiling smugly. Ah, vengeance is sweet. How I hoped I'd be the one to catch you. Severus. Lupin pleaded as Snape pointed his wand at Black's neck. I told Dumbledore you were helping your old friend into the castle. And here's the proof. Brilliant. And, as usual, dead wrong. Now give us our wands back. Remus and I have a bit of unfinished business to tend to. B.A.'s Black approaches. Snape puts his wand to Black's neck. Give me a reason. I beg you. Don't be a fool, Severus. He can't help it. It's habit by now. Sirius smirked, looking at Snape. Quiet, Sirius. Listen to you two. Quarreling like an old married couple. The creature and the criminal. Snape smirked, looking at the two men. Piss off. Witty as ever I see. Tell me, will you be so irreverent when I turn you over to the Dementors? As Black reacts, Snape continued. Do I detect a flicker of fear? One can only imagine what it must be like to endure the Dementor's kiss. It's said to be unbearable to witness. But I'll do my best. Snape's eyes harden. He gestures to the door. After you. As the others start to go, Yuki glances at the table where Lupin has left Harry's wand. In a flash, it's in her hand. Expelliarmus, Snape soars into the air, hits the wall with a thud, and slides down. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stare in shock. Yuki, Ron shouted. You attacked a teacher. Yuki looks a bit shocked herself, then turns to Black. You said Peter before. Peter Pettigrew, correct? Yuki asked in a hurry, not worrying about anything. Correct. He was at school with us. We thought he was a friend. No. Pettigrew's dead. He killed him. Harry continued, looking at the two men. As Yuki points at Black, Black laughs mirthlessly. I thought so too. Until you mentioned seeing Pettigrew on the map. That the map was messed up? No, Yuki spoke. The map never lies. Pettigrew's alive. And he's right there. Black points at Ron. Ron goes white with fear. And me? It's lunatic. Ron said. You're mad, Dash, Hermione continued. Not you, you idiot. You're rat. Scabbers? Scabbers has been in my family for 12 years. Curiously long life for a common garden rat. He's missing a toe, isn't he? Black unfolds a dog-eared clipping from the Daily Prophet. It shows Ron in Egypt with his family, Scabbers on his shoulder. So what? A rat can't possibly live longer than 2 years. But I thought it was just a wizard thing, Dash, Yuki stated, turning to Ron. And all they could find of Pettigrew was his finger. Dirty coward cut it off so everyone would think he was dead. Then he transformed into a rat. Yuki stares into Black's sunken eyes. Wanting to believe, desperate to believe, glances at Ron, his agonized face. Scabbers squirms violently. Show me. Yuki softly said. Lupin and Black turned to Ron. He holds Scabbers protectively. What are you going to do to him? Sirius and Lupin exchange a glance. Together. With that, Lupin takes out his wand, and, as one, he and Black cast a stream of blue-white light. Scabbers twists madly in midair, then transforms into a very short man with thinning hair and grubby hands. Peter Pettigrew. S. Sirius. Remus. My old friends. Neither speaks. Pettigrew's small, watery eyes dart toward the windows and door. Suddenly, he makes a break for it, but Sirius merely shoves him back. Pettigrew's nose twitches, his gaze finding Harry and Yuki. His hands flutter nervously, reveal a missing index finger. Harry, look at you. Why you look just like your father. Like James. We were the best of friends. He and I dash. Shut up. I didn't mean to. The Dark Lord. You have no idea the weapons he possesses. Ask yourself what you would have done, Sirius. What would you have done? Said Peter, shielding himself with the piano. Died. Died rather than betray my friends. And you should have realized, Peter, if Voldemort didn't kill you, we would. Sirius and Remus both said, No, please, you can't. With Peter's eyes darting, finding Ron, I'm your friend? A good pet? You won't let them kill me, will you? I was your rat. Ron draws back in disgust. Pettigrew turns to Yuki, sweet girl. Odd girl. Surely you won't let them. As one, Lupin and Black raise their wands. Point them directly into Pettigrew's face. Harry pulled Peter away from Yuki, who backed up in disgust. He shrinks back trembling, closing his eyes in fear, when Pettigrew's lids lift. Lupin and Black turn. Staggered. Harry, Yuki, this man. I know what he is, but we'll take him to the castle. Bless you, boy. Bless you. Peter ran over and grabbed Harry's hoodie. Get off. I said we'd take you to the castle. After that, the Dementors can have you. As Pettigrew emerges from the gap, he prattles desperately. Turn me into a maggot, a dung beetle, a flobberworm, anything but the Dementors. Ron and Yuki walked out together. Ron, haven't I been a good friend? A good pet? You won't let them kill me, will you? I was your rat. As Ron draws back in disgust, as Yuki shook her head, helping Ron over to the rock, a sleepwalking Snape bumps his head against a low limb. Yuki turns to Harry as Hermione went over to Ron. Don't worry, he's under the somnambulist charm. It's primarily used to transport the seriously deranged. As Harry nods, You're really brilliant, Yuki, honestly, Harry spoke, looking at her as Yuki smiled a little. Pettigrew's pleading eyes find Hermione. Yuki looked up in the sky and saw the northern star. Sweet girl, clever girl, surely you won't let them. Hermione tugs her robes from Pettigrew's sweaty grasp. Harry turns, sees Black staring in wonder at the castle, shining radiantly under the bright bowl of the night sky. Go with your godfather? Hermione will take care of Ron Dash. Yuki put her hand on his shoulder. Harry nodded and walked over to Sirius. Beautiful, isn't it? I'll never forget the first time I walked through those doors. It'll be nice to do it again. Freely. That was a noble thing you did back there. He doesn't deserve it. Harry studies Pettigrew briefly, looks away, lost in thought. I don't reckon my father wouldn't want his best friends to become killers for a worthless piece of vermin like Pettigrew. Besides, dead, the truth dies with him. Alive, you're free. Sirius studies Harry's profile, moved by this. I don't know if you know, Harry, but when you were born, James and Lily made me your guardian. I know. And well, I'll understand if you choose to stay with your aunt and uncle, but so you could come live with you? When? Said Harry excitedly, looking at Sirius. Soon as my name's clear. Harry looks at Hogwarts, grins at the thought. Sirius does the same. Then Hermione's voice rises in the air, quivering with fear. Yuki, and you seem to be close, she's a sweet girl. Harry nodded as he turned almost red. Yes, she is. Sirius grinned, turning to his godfather. Yuki was helping Ron with his foot and putting pressure to stop the bleeding. You could lose it, Dash, she sarcastically said, looking at Ron. Yeah, she could chop it off, Dash, Ron uttered, looking down at his foot. Hermione got up and looking up. Harry. He turns, sees Hermione staring at the full moon. His eyes shift. Lupin is a rigid silhouette, his fingers twitching. Remus, old friend. Did you take your potion tonight? Lupin, twitching, shakes his head. Pettigrew's eyes dart, taking in the situation, then slowly shift. Note the wand trembling in Lupin lengthening fist. Run. All of you. Now. But none of them does. Transfixed, watching his bristles poke through Lupin's skin. Black steps forward, wrap his arms around his friend, presses his mouth to his ear. You know the man you truly are, Remus. This flesh is only flesh. This heart is where you truly live. This heart. Here. As Lupin's wand drops, Pettigrew leaps. No! Harry shouted, Expelliarmus. Lupin's wand flies from Pettigrew's hand, and he freezes. Then slowly turns. Face blank, eyes closed, he grins hideously. Transforms. Stunned, Harry watches a rat dart into the night. A howl prices the air, and Yuki wheels. With a shrug, Harry dash, Lupin tosses Black into the air, then turns. He is no longer human. He's a werewolf. Yuki, Ron, Harry, and Hermione begin to edge back. Professor, Yuki softly stated, looking at the wolf. Yuki, come on, dash, Ron said, trying to get the girl out of the trance. Yuki knew Remus was still in the werewolf, so it was still him. The werewolf's eyes blaze. Long teeth glitter. Then a horrifying growl erupts from its throat. The four spin help Ron begin to flee and run flat into Snape. As they collapse in a great clumsy pile, Snape's eyes flutter open, the spell broken. Seeing Hermione atop him, he sweeps her aside. Out of the way! Snape moves and finds the werewolf preparing to pounce. Leaping to his feet, Snape draws his wand and steps forward, shielding Hermione, Yuki, Harry, and Ron. The werewolf howls and sprints forward before a faint dog intercepts it in midair. They hit the ground in a fierce tangle of flashing teeth, a single horrible flailing beast. Again and again, the dog pushes the werewolf back, but the werewolf is too strong. Sirius, shouted Harry. The dog yelps roar in pain, and the werewolf flings it into the tall grass. As it charges after, Harry pushes past Snape, dashes into the night. Yuki makes to follow, but Snape holds her back. Harry Potter, shouted Yuki. In shock, Harry stopped and turned back just to hear another yelp. Harry makes a full run for up. Up ahead is the full moon. He spies the dog, lying inert, the werewolf's razor-sharp claws suspended over its neck. No! Desperately, Harry plucks a thick ground from the ground and hurls it with all his might. Bullseye! The werewolf freezes, turns, begins to move toward Harry. Harry draws his wand, terrified but tormented as well, knowing Lupin dwells somewhere within the beast. Please, Professor, stop. It's me. Suddenly a howl pierces the night. The werewolf falters, cocking its head toward the forest. Harry waits, petrified. The werewolf's eyes shift back to him. Its snails moves closer, ready to kill. Harry covers his face with his arm when a second howl echoes high above the forest. Slowly, Harry drops his arm. Looks. The werewolf bounds toward the forest, vanishes. Harry's eyes shift. In the darkness, the wounded dog lurches through the tall grass. Falls. Rises. Falls again, each time becoming more human. As he disappears over the ridge, Harry sprints after. Harry stumbles down to Black, who lies on the water's edge, now fully a man, arms and face gleaming with lacerations. Sirius. Harry looks into his glassy eyes. Sirius. A fragile mist escapes Harry's mouth. A raw wind tosses his hair. Chill bumps pebble his skin. A fringe of ice appears at the lake's edge. Then they appear, oozing like smoke through the tree across the lake. Dementors. No. Expecto Patronum. A thin silvery wisp weeps from Harry's wand, hovering like a vial. But the Dementors continue to come. Harry places his hand on Black's heaving heart, poises his wand once more. Expecto Patronum. Harry's Patronus blooms briefly and dies. Harry's eyes flutter, the Dementors twisting madly in his vision, drawing closer. Sirius gasped. Silvery feathers of light tumble from his lips as if his very soul were leaving him. Then a light splinters the trees. Harry squints, sees a fiery stag appear, its body luminous, slashing through the trees, sowing light in the darkness. The Dementors wilt in its wake, but more replace them, sweeping down in waves. Still the stag charges on. The light extends the forest, blazing with it. The remaining Dementors flee, drifting across the moon-like ash. The light ebbs. The stag's luminous body flickers. There is a bright flash, and darkness returns. A single thread of light, all that remains, spinning down to the size of a pearl in the palm of man, standing deep in the trees. Harry studies the strangely familiar silhouette. Then it is gone. Silence drops like a curtain. Mist rises from the lake. As Snape appears at the top of the rise, Yuki's shadow ripples against the curtain that encircles Harry's bed. A hand reaches out Harry's hand and sweeps the curtain. Ron lies opposite, his leg bandaged. Hermione paces. Stops. Harry. Hermione hushed. Yuki and Ron both turned. I saw my dad. What? The three said in unison, confused. He said the Dementors away. I saw him. Across the lake. Yuki and Hermione exchanges a private glance with Ron turns back. Listen, Harry. They've captured Sirius. Any minute the Dementors are going to perform the kiss. The kiss? Harry asked. It's what Dementors do to those they want to destroy. They clamp their jaws over the victim's mouth and suck out his soul. Yuki explained, looking at the boy. You mean they're going to kill Sirius? Harry asked. The two girls shook their head. No. It's worse. Much worse. You go on living, but you have no memory, no sense of self. You're just a shell, an empty shell, said Hermione. As Harry reacts, the door opens and Dumbledore enters. Headmaster, you got to stop them. They got the wrong man. It's true, sir. Sirius is innocent. Yuki spoke, looking at the man. It's Scabbers. Who did it? Well, not Scabbers, but Peter Pettigrew. He hasn't died. He's an animagus. Ron explained as Dumbledore turned to his understanding. We know the truth. Please, sir, you must believe us. Hermione panicked, looking at Dumbledore. I do, Miss Granger. But I'm sorry to say the word of 4 13-year-old wizards will convince few others. A child's voice, however honest and true, is meaningless to those who have forgotten how to listen. As Dumbledore turns to the window, a shooting star plummets silently through the sky. Ah, a shooting star? If ever one was to make a wish, now would be the time. But time, I'm afraid, is precisely our problem. On cue, the midnight bell begins to chime. Mysterious thing time. Powerful. And when meddled with, dangerous. Sirius Black is in the topmost cell of the Dark Tower. Dumbledore turned to Hermione and Yuki. You know the laws, Miss Granger and Miss Sterling. You must not be seen. And you would, I feel, do well to return before this last chime. If not, well, the consequences are really too ghastly to discuss. 3 turns should do it, I think. If you succeed, more than one innocent life may be spared tonight. Yuki and Hermione both exchanged looks. Dumbledore hands Yuki, Harry, and Hermione each a stick of chocolate, then starts to go, but stopped in his tracks. By the way, when in doubt, I find retracing my steps to be a wise place to begin. Good luck. He smiles, exits. Yuki glances curiously at the chocolate. What in bloody hell was all that about? Ron asked, but Hermione doesn't reply. Instead of looping the pendant's long chain around Yuki and Harry's neck as well as her own. Sorry, Ron, but seeing as you can't walk. As Ron and Harry exchange a curious glance, the bell continues to chime and time reverses in a dizzying backwards blur, as if a tape were being rewound. Every moment that occurred in the hospital room flickering by at a dizzying speed while, outside the window, darkness gives way to dusk, and the sun unsets, returning to its place low on the horizon. At this point, the time reversal ends, and the room is now empty except for Hermione, Harry, and Yuki. As Yuki unloops the necklace, Harry glances around in confusion. What just happened? Where's Ron? Both ignore the question, eyes the clock on the wall. 7:30. Where were we at 7:30? We have to be making our way down to Hagrid's, Yuki answered. Come on, we can't be seen, Hermione quickly said. Yuki grabs Harry's arm, slams through the door. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione come to a mad, huffing halt. Yuki, Hermione, will you please tell me what it is we're doing? Hermione holds up a hand, silencing him. Annoyed, Harry follows her gaze and blinks in disbelief. Across the grounds, he sees himself, along with Yuki, Hermione, and Ron, about to confront Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle near the monoliths. But that's us. This is not normal. Dumbfounded, Harry turns. Yuki holds up the hourglass. This is a time. Turner, McGonagall let me and Hermione use it for the first term. That's why we have been popping up in places. We can't be seen because if we are, bad things will happen. You mean we've gone back in time? Hermione turned to them, nodded. Yes, Dumbledore wanted us to return to this moment. Clearly, something happened he wants us to change. A soft smack is heard. They turn, see Malfoy land on the seat of his pants in the sundial garden, rub his lips. Good punch, Harry whispered. Hurry, Malfoy's coming. Yuki pulls Harry under the bridge. Seconds later, footsteps clamor over their heads. Not a word of this to anyone. Understood. I'll get that jumped up mudblood one of these days. Mark my words. Eyes narrowed in anger. Hermione leans out, reaches up, and sends Malfoy spiraling. As Harry pulls her back, Malfoy looks around in confusion, then dashes off with the others. Seconds later, Harry emerges, marvels at the sight of himself and Yuki, Hermione, and Ron heading down the slope to Hagrid's hut. His eyes shift to the pumpkin patch. Look, Buckbeak's still alive. Yuki smiled and walked up to Harry. Of course. Remember what Dumbledore said. If we succeed, more than one innocent life could be spared. Yuki remembered, turning to Hermione. Buckbeak? But how will saving Buckbeak help Sirius? We'll see, Hermione uttered. As Buckbeak feasts on a ferret, Harry and Hermione duck behind a pile of pumpkins. Peering into the hut, Harry sees Hermione and Ron embrace awkwardly, then Yuki and Ron. He turns, only to find Hermione analyzing the moment with a grin as Yuki and Harry hugged. Caught regards Harry defensively as Yuki turned to Harry, who didn't look amused. What's wrong? She asked. Harry shook his head. Nothing. Harry looks toward the slope, sees Fudge and the others approaching in a cloud of crows. Here they come. I better hurry. No. Fudge has to see Buckbeak before we steal him. Otherwise, he'll think Hagrid set him free. Harry nods, then looked toward the hut. Inside, Hagrid is handing Scabbers to Ron. That's Pettigrew. As he starts to rise, Hermione grabs him. No, Harry. You can't. She spoke as Yuki looked into Hagrid's hut. Hermione, that's the man who betrayed my parents. You don't expect me to just sit here. Yes, you must, Hermione said, pointing into the hut. Harry, you're in Hagrid's hut right now. If you go bursting inside, you'll think you've gone. Mel, awful things can happen when wizards meddle with time. We can't be seen. Yuki turns, watches Fudge and the others drawing closer. She frowns, glances into the hut. Fudge is coming, and we're not leaving. Why aren't we leaving? Hermione asked. Not sure, Yuki uttered. Then on the ground beside her, Hermione notices a jagged star-shaped stone. Instantly, she grabs it, rises, and hurls it through the open window. The sound of glass shattering is heard within the hut. Are you mad? Hermione ignores him. Yuki swiftly whistling a second stone through the window and off the back of Harry's head. That hurt, sorry. She grinned, turning to Hermione. Crows begin to drop atop the roof. Fudge's party arrives, raps on the door. Small. Any minute now, we're going to be coming out the back door. Quickly, Yuki, Hermione, and Harry dash into the trees directly behind, just in time to see themselves along with Ron exit the back door and slip behind the pumpkin pile where only seconds before they were hiding. As Fudge appears at the window and picks his nose as before, Yuki ponders the back of her own head. Is that really what I look like today? She asked under her breath. Shuh. Harry grabbed Yuki's hips, pulling her back. Yuki and Harry were face to face as they heard. Nothing, Yuki's voice said as the two of them looked away from each other. Yuki poked her head from behind and watched Harry and Hermione watch themselves start up the slope. The coast clear, they slip out of the trees. Now Harry. As Harry vaults into the patch, the crows fly around, cawing at his ankles, pecking at his feet. It is the decision of the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures that the hippogriff Buckbeak, hereafter called the Condemned, shall be executed this day at sundown. You should go. You're better with creatures, Harry stated. Yuki nodded and walked over to Buckbeak with Hermione. Buckbeak studies her curiously, a ferret leg dangling from his beak. Yuki bows. The ferret leg disappears and Buckbeak returns Yuki's nod. As Harry takes Buckbeak's chain, a flint-eyed crow peck his hand. Get away, Harry shouted as Yuki shushed him. Harry waves the crow away, yanks hard on Buckbeak's chain. Yuki walked over to the hippogriff and Hermione grabbed the ferrets. "Come on, let's get you out of here, Dash," said Yuki, petting Buckbeak. "The committee's appointed executioner shall dispatch the condemned by means of beheading." Small Buckbeak. "Come on." Buckbeak refuses to move. As witness below. "You sign here, Hagrid." "Very well, gentlemen. Let's step outside, shall we?" Ding! The Hogwarts bell begins to toll. Harry and Hermione exchanged a glance. Harry tugs harder. "Excuse me, Minister. I believe I must sign as well." Harry pulled at the chain, straining mightily as Yuki tried to calm Buckbeak down. When Hermione pops up, bows quickly and dangles a dead ferret before Buckbeak. "Here, Beaky, come and get the nice dead ferret." "Yum yum." Harry looks at her as if she's mad, but it's working. As Buckbeak trots after, the cawing crows scatter. Harry and Hermione lead Buckbeak away when the back door suddenly opens. They freeze, caught Fudge's eyes drifting their way. When, as before, Dumbledore raises his hand and directs the attention of the others away from Buckbeak. Professor Dippet had those blackberries planted when he was headmaster. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione shoo Buckbeak along, disappear into the forest just as Dumbledore concludes his reverie. "Let's get this over with, shall we?" Yuki, Harry, and Hermione, their view unobstructed by the low stand of trees, this time watch the executioner approach the pumpkin patch and stop. Quickly, the confusion in his masked eyes turns to anger. "But where is it? I just saw the beast not moments ago." "Hagrid?" "Beaky." Hearing Hagrid's husky voice, Buckbeak strains at his tether, whimpers. Eerily, Yuki turned to the hippogriff and petted its beak, calming the creature down. Hermione and Harry looked in awe as Buckbeak was now listening to Yuki mumbling to it. "Come now, Dumbledore. Someone's obviously released him." "Professor Isviar." "I didn't." Hagrid panicked. "I'm quite sure the minister isn't suggesting that you had anything to do with it, Hagrid. How could you? You've been with us all along." Dumbledore knowingly said. "We should search the grounds. Search the skies if you must, Minister. In the meantime, I wouldn't say no to a cup of tea, Hagrid. Or a large brandy." Dumbledore turned to the executioner. "It seems your services will no longer be required." The executioner lifts his blade, and with a brutal fury plunges it into the flesh of a pumpkin with a sickening chop. The crows scatter into the sky. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione race through the trees as Buckbeak Lopez easily behind. "Now what?" Harry asked, looking at them. "We save Sirius," Hermione stated as Yuki turned away from Buckbeak. "And we do that how?" Harry continued. "Noya Hermione. Actually, we should go to the Whomping Willow. We all should still be in there, Dash." Yuki looked away from the sky. Hermione and Harry turned to her. "The Big Dipper too is there, so Lupin should be walking in." "Let's go, Dash," Hermione stated. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione walked through the forest and saw Lupin, who was at the Whomping Willow. "How did you know?" Hermione asked, turning to Yuki. "Astronomy and divination." Yuki smirked, turning to Hermione. Hermione shook her head with a grin. "Look, it's Lupin." As the Whomping Willow begins to thrash, its violence oddly muted at this distance, Lupin takes a stick, pokes a knot on the trunk. Instantly, the willow calms. "Wait until Fred and George hear about that one," Harry spoke. "Well, they can't, Dash," Yuki said, turning to him as he nodded. "Here comes Snape," Hermione said. As Lupin disappears into the gap at the base of the tree, Snape makes his way down the slope. "And now we wait. Now we wait," Yuki and Hermione both said, sitting down, leaning on a tree. Yuki took a look upwards to see the tops of the trees etched against the darkening sky. Bats fly past all of them when Buckbeak snags one. A tail twitches briefly between his beak. Then it is gone. "At least someone's enjoying himself," Hermione stated as Yuki nodded. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione sit together in the lengthening shadows. Harry snaps off a piece of chocolate, hands it to Hermione and Yuki. "Yuki, Hermione." "Yes. Before, down by the lake, when I was with Sirius, I did see that someone made the Dementors go away. With a Patronus. I heard Snape telling Dumbledore when we were taken to the hospital. According to him, only a really powerful wizard could have conjured it. It was my dad." Yuki looked over to Harry away from Buckbeak. "It was my dad who conjured the Patronus." The two girls exchanged looks. "But Harry, your dad's dead." I know. I'm just saying what I saw. Hermione nods, not wanting to press Harry further, then glances beyond the trees, toward the whomping willow. Here we come, Yuki said, getting up. A shadow emerges under a full moon black. Yuki, Harry, Pettigrew, Lupin, Hermione, Ron, sleepwalking Snape. Harry studies himself and Sirius. You see Sirius talking to me? He's asking me to come live with him. That's brilliant, Yuki said, turning to him. Harry nods, his voice wistful. When we free him, I'll never have to go back to the Dursleys. I'm going to tell him I'd like to live someplace in the country. I think he'd like that, after all those years in Azkaban. We don't need a big place, and I can help him. Yuki smiled at Harry. A howl pierces the night. Hermione glances toward the willow. It's happened. Lupin's transformed, Hermione said, which means Pettigrew is slipping safely into the night. While we just stand here, a fierce growling is heard as twin silhouettes the dog and the werewolf bound into the tall grass. Harry watches himself appear, hurl the stick as before. The werewolf turns, begins to stalk. Oh wow! Harry and Yuki wheels, sees Hermione, hands cupped to her mouth, making a loud howl. He covers her mouth. What are you doing? Saving your life. Werewolves respond to their own dash, Yuki uttered. Harry looks back to the tall grass. The werewolf is frozen. As before, it begins to approach Harry again. Oh wow! This time, Harry doesn't stop her. Thanks, but we have to move, Harry hurriedly stated. Why? Because that werewolf you just called is running right this way. They exchange a glance and run. Really fast. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione dash for their lives, swing behind a huge tree. The werewolf appears, pauses. As it approaches the tree, Yuki, Harry, and Hermione silently sidestep in the opposite direction until the werewolf disappears behind the tree. Buckbeak, we gotta find him. Yuki panicked. The werewolf, 15 feet past, waiting. As Yuki, Harry, and Hermione step out, they freeze. The werewolf poises itself, preparing to pounce, when the trees shake with the fury of a hurricane and Buckbeak charges into the clearing, screening Harry and Hermione. The werewolf turns angrily, makes the charge. With lightning-fast reflexes, Buckbeak claws the air only inches from the werewolf's face. The werewolf stops, eyes glittering with rage, then howls, turning. It vanishes into the forest. Poor Professor Lupin is having a really tough night, Yuki uttered. Just then, a chill wind rises, the leaves of the trees tremble, eerie shadows flutter over the moon, greasy as smoke Dementors. Let's go! Shocked and terror-stricken. Opposite them, across the lake, a cyclone of Dementors whirl madly above Harry and Black. Intercut between the Black Lake and the edge of the forest, Harry watches himself vainly attempt to conjure a Patronus as the cyclone only continues to grow. Yuki worryingly looked at him. This is horrible, Hermione uttered. Yeah, Yuki stated. Don't worry, my dad will come. Right there, you'll see. He'll come any minute. He'll conjure the Patronus. Yuki and Hermione eyes Harry warily. He is transfixed, staring hungrily toward the outcrop. The wind rises. The lake begins to freeze. One after another, Dementors drop from the sky, vanish in the cyclone. No one's coming, Harry. He will come. She looks. Nothing. Desperately, her eyes flash to the cyclone, to the pitiful sight of Harry and Black at the water's edge, racked with pain, dying. Harry, when you went to Lupin, were you able to conjure one? Yuki asked, turning to the boy after thinking for a while. Yeah, no one's coming. Harry, you're dying, both of you. Yuki whispered to him, trying to get it through his head that it wasn't his father, but it was him. Harry's face changes. A riddle unravels. He draws his wand. Harry, no! Hermione shouted. Yuki shushed her friend. I reckon he's got it. Yuki smiled, wanting it to work. Expecto Patronum. A wisp of silver light escapes his wand, hovering like a mist, then blooms magnificently. The trees explode with light. The lake blazes with reflected fire. Harry stands utterly still, wand extended to the heavens. Across the lake, the Dementors retreat. Harry waits, still as a statue, until each and everyone is gone. Yuki grinned proudly at the boy. Harry dropped his arm just to be tackled in a hug. "You did it, Dash," Yuki uttered, hugging him tightly. Harry turned red right away. Hermione smiled at the two, not interpreting it. "We should go," Hermione said as Yuki looked at Harry for a second. Yuki, Harry, and Hermione plunged, riding Buckbeak, soaring toward the castle. Outside the grounds, the Dementors wait restlessly. Up ahead, Fudge and Snape enter the dark tower, torches in hand. "You were right, Yuki and Hermione. It wasn't my dad I saw earlier. It was me. I saw myself conjuring the Patronus before. I knew I could do it this time because I'd already done it. Does that make sense?" Yuki and Hermione contemplate this. "No," Hermione said, looking down in fear. "But I don't like this." Snape, torch in hand, leads the way as Fudge huffs after. Hermione pushes past Harry. "Alhambra." Sirius tests the iron still locked. "Didn't really expect that to work." Snape and Fudge draw closer. "Yuki, give me one," Hermione asked. Yuki thought of it. Dunamis, Liberare, Annihilare, Emancipare. Yuki spoke as Hermione tried all of them, and they didn't work. No, 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 no. "You might try," Sirius interrupted the girls' thinking. "Quiet. I'm trying to think," Hermione spoke. She resumes pacing, muttering furiously. Then stops and turns to Yuki. "If you dash." Yuki grabbed Hermione's wand, knowing already reading the girl's mind. "Bombard." The cell doors fly into the sky. "Always wanted to use that dash," Yuki dreamingly said. "That'll do." Sirius nodded. We see Buckbeak spirit Harry, Hermione, and Sirius off the terrace and soar in the sky. Just as Snape and Fudge reach the top of the tower, Black puts his hands to Yuki's waist, swings her off Buckbeak, and onto the ground next to Harry. "I'll be forever grateful for this." "To all of you." Harry and Sirius walked back as Yuki and Hermione both went to take care of Buckbeak. "I want to go with you. One day, perhaps. For some time. Life will be too unpredictable. Besides, you're meant to be here." Black claps his shoulder, looks him in the eye. "But promise me something, Harry. Anything. Trust yourself. No matter the challenges you face, and I fear they will be many, you'll be surprised how many times you can find the answers here." Sirius pointed at Harry's heart as Harry looked at the man. As Sirius climbs atop Buckbeak, shooting star arcs through the heavens. "A shooting star. Make a wish." Black gives Buckbeak a slap, and they soar into the glittering sky. Harry and Hermione stand watching when ding. They wheel. Look to the clock tower. "We have to go," Yuki said. As Yuki, Harry, and Hermione dash off, rising with them as they race up the tower stairway, then passing through the mechanism and on through to the end of the corridor. The clock tower bell thunders. The door opens as Dumbledore backs out. "By the way, when in doubt, I always find retracing my steps to be a wise place to begin. Good luck." As Dumbledore begins to close the door, Yuki, Harry, and Hermione stumble frantically forward, the door about to hit the jamb, when suddenly Dumbledore stops, looks up. "Well, he's free." Sirius. We did it," Harry stated, looking at him. "Did what?" With a twinkle in his eye, Dumbledore swings open the door. As Yuki, Harry, and Hermione enter, they catch the faintest glimpse of themselves across the room just as they evaporate. Ron blinks, turns, frowns. "How'd you two get over there?" "I was just talking to you, over there." Ron glances to the other side of the room, frowns. Hermione glances mischievously at Harry. "What'd you think, Hermione?" "Harry? Too much for him." "Everything that's happened tonight?" Yuki asked. "Afraid so. Always been a bit of the nervous type." "Ron has." Hermione stated. Ron stares at them, confounded. Slowly, they all slowly. "Honestly, Ron, how can you be in two places at once?" Harry asked with a shrug. The four of them started to laugh as Yuki rested her head on Harry's shoulder, tired. At Hogwarts in the morning, the whomping willow sways in a light breeze. The black lake shimmers, clouds drifting in its glassy mirror. Yuki walks softly toward and opens the door to Lupin's office and peers in. Lupin stands over a battered suitcase, filling it with the last of his books. Without turning, he speaks. Hello, Yuki. She furrows her eyebrows confused. Lupin turns, smiles through haggard eyes. Saw you coming. The Marauder's map lies open on an otherwise bare desk. Yuki nods, look back at Lupin, unable to disguise her shock at Lupin's appearance. I've looked worse, believe me. Yuki eyes the open desk drawers, the bare bookshelves. Have you really been sacked? She softly asked with a bandage on her cheek. Resigned? Actually. Yuki nodded, once more understanding. I understand. How do people know? Yuki asked. It seems that someone has let slip the nature of my condition. I wonder, Yuki softly spoke, looking around the office. Lupin nodded, knowing that the girl knew. However, it was bound to get out. This time tomorrow, the owls will start arriving. Parents will not want someone like me teaching their children. But doesn't Dumbledore know? Dumbledore has already risked enough on my behalf. Besides, people like me, well, let's just say I'm used to this by now. But before I go, tell me about Harry's Patronus. A stag. I'm pretty sure he is still sleeping, Yuki explained, looking at the man. His father used to transform into one. That's how he was able to keep me company when I became sick. He was a great friend, James, same with your father, but he thought it wasn't a good idea to become on illegal animagus. Lupin smiles wanly, lifts his suitcase. Well, yeah, always wanted to know, why did you not act like Harry when you saw Peter? Then stops. Because I can't change the past. Plus, I always will have my mother. Yuki softly spoke. Lupin nodded. There are stories about him, you know. Some are even true. But I think it's safe to say, in the end, you'll know them best by getting to know yourself. Lupin then raises his wand. Mischief managed. Yuki watches the map go blank. Looks back. Lupin is gone. She grabbed the empty map, looking at it. Yuki was walking down the corridors towards the Great Hall. Harry, she spoke as the boy turned to her and stopped walking. Hey, Harry spoke. Yuki smiled and handed him the map. I think it's best if you have it. It was yours in the first place. Harry grinned and took the map back. Coming to the Great Hall? Yeah. Ron stands amid a circle of excited Gryffindors. Stand back, I said. I'll take it upstairs if you don't settle. As Harry and Yuki arrive, he glances at Hermione, who clears her throat loudly. The others turn, begin all speaking at once. Harry, wherever did you get it? Neville asked as Yuki furrowed her eyebrows, turning to Harry. Can I have a go, Harry? After you, of course, Seamus asked. Quiet, Ron shouted as they listened to him. Thank you. Let the man through. Mystified, Harry steps forward with Yuki following behind and, standing with Fred and George, the boys peeling away, clearing his view of the broomstick in Ron's hands. The label gleams. Firebolt. Whose is that? Harry asked. Yuki put her head down on the table after sitting in between Fred and George. Whose is it? It's yours, mate. I mean, they did you act you to use it, Yuki spoke, looking at them. I got it back, but did McGonagall ever say who gave it to me? Harry asked as Fred put his arm around Yuki's shoulder. Yuki moved his hand away from her. It's a mystery still, though McGonagall found this in the wrapping. Harry turns, sees Hermione holding up a feather that belonged to a hippogriff. That's a hippogriff feather. As Harry stops short, Hermione raises her eyebrow. As the three of them share a secret glance. Boom! The huge vertical doors burst open and Harry, trailed by the others, exits with the firebolt. As he strides off, others join the assembly, Hagrid, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle among them, curious to see what the commotion is all about. As Harry stops, an expectant hush hangs over the moment. Go on, Harry. Seamus boosted. Yeah, let's see. Neville continued. Harry mounts the broom, licks his finger, and jabs it in the air. A few others do the same, but Yuki and Hermione, who exchanged looks, Hagrid does the same. Crabbe and Goyle start to do the same when Malfoy slaps their hands down. Finally, Harry places his hand on the broom, sets his grip, takes a breath, and frowns. What's wrong? Fred and George both said. I don't think it works. I think it's defective. Harry told them as Yuki knew he was lying, knowing the boy way too well. A collective groan, dejected. Many of the kids begin to drift toward the castle. Harry calls after. Oh, come on now. It's just a broom, just a broom. Hagrid nodded, walking away with everyone else. Harry's eye shifts to Yuki, Ron, and Hermione. A wink. The fastest broom in the world. Yuki's face heated up as everyone turned and Harry jets off.